good evening, everyone. I'm going to call the meeting to order at 6:01. If you can rise and say the Pledge Allegiance with me. I pledge
allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Indivisible. All right. Before we start, I do want to acknowledge that we have a school board member on the phone, Dan Cloutier. If you can just say here and if you're alone or not.
I'll talk to you about it. No,
I am here, and all I have are my computer monitors in front of me.
It's me for you.
Great, thank you, Dan.
Okay.
All right, so tonight, before we start our regular board meeting, we're going to start working on budget workshop. And because we have a lot later, I was thinking we stop at 8. Because we need to finish, we have other work to do. And then Wednesday, we'll be back to just work on budget. So I'll bring it to you, or Scott, who wants to start?
I can give kind of a general introduction, and then I'm happy to hand it over to Mr. Gross.
Okay.
Good evening, everyone. So tonight we would move into kind of the discussion and deliberations portion of your budget process. So if there are any questions that anyone has for any of the school lines as well as the district lines, now would be a good time to discuss them. And in all likelihood, depending upon how much discussion the board is interested in having, either tonight or later on Wednesday, probably more likely, we can also have discussion about other warrant articles. So specifically, Mrs. Bermakowitz had asked, when do we talk about other warrant articles? This would be the time as well. So, Mr. Gross, anything as a cleanup to begin, or
no?
Anything to add?
No, I think we're all set.
Okay.
Ready to go?
Did we get a, Heather, if I may?
Yes, go ahead, Dan.
Did we get the health insurance maximum?
We did. I think that came in at the end of last week, and I remember it was 0.1 less than we budgeted. So Scott, can you?
Yeah, we had budgeted at 6.2%. It came in at 6.1% as the guaranteed maximum rate, and that's also subject to change, as you know. But
unfortunately, Dan, it was pretty small in terms of if we would have gone from 6.2 to 4.8, that would have been a significant savings, but it was unfortunately pretty small.
Yeah. We don't happen to know what that 0.1 means. 10,000?
5,000-ish.
Scott said in the five grand range.
Okay.
So do we want to go line by line as we did last year, right? We went through.
Yeah, if I may,
Yeah,
there was a couple of things that I wanted to cover, which I wasn't able to cover with the budget committee, and there's reasons for that, one of which is your default budget calculation and default budget items, because this governing body determines the default budget. It really wasn't for the budget committee to be part of that discussion. Also, I didn't get a chance due to time to talk about our capital reserve fund and what that looks like. And just for the benefit of some of the newer folks, I just wanted to give a little bit
Sure.
of an overview. So I did give you this green sheet, and this is just a summary of the budget overview. As you recall, the total appropriation is comprised of your general fund, your food service fund, and your special revenue or your grants type fund. And in terms of percentages, right now the increases of new spending is $304,000 and $304,144, which is a 0.67% of an increase. And recognizing that this does not include your teacher contract. So that's we try to do this intentionally to try to keep it as lean as possible. The salmon sheet is your revenues, kind of discussed that before. This is the one for me that has always been the most challenging in trying to predict what the revenues are, because they move around, and when they move around by hundreds of thousands of dollars. For us, it's been very fortunate over the last couple of years because it's been monies to the positive, meaning that we got a lot more aid and a lot more grants and things like that we didn't think we were going to get. But, for those who have been on the school board for a long time, you try to estimate these revenues conservatively, because if they don't come in great, then that becomes an issue. So I still have to monitor the impacts of some of these educational savings accounts. I think we have 22 that were doled out, what impact that might have on revenues, because every kid that was part of the school system that leaves and gets one of these scholarships, you lose about 3,800 and change in terms of your base adequacy aid. And I don't think all 22 were previously enrolled, but I have to kind of monitor that piece. So more to follow on the revenue side as we go through, but just wanted to keep you apprised of that. On your capital reserve fund, it's a white piece of paper, and I just try to give you a little bit of a running chronology of kind of where we're at. So we started the fund with a deposit in 2019 of $200,000. I'm not going to go over each and every expense, but suffice to say that we did improvements over at the middle school, some here at the high school with regard to stairs, and then most recently, the board committed monies for the Mountain View Middle School cistern project, which we're still waiting on final invoices, but that's going to be around $155,000. And we've also committed money towards a replacement scoreboard that is delayed until, I think, a December arrival, which means we're probably not going to install it until the spring, but that's roughly around $30,000, so be a little less than that. So our expected balance is going to be in that $255,000 neighborhood, all right? So I wanted to keep you apprised of that. Then the next one that I wanted to share with you is on a yellow piece of paper, and this is your default budget line review. And Dan, this should be in that PDF packet. Do you have that? Because I'm going to go through it.
Dan, did you hear Scott?
I'm sorry, I've been talking with my mute button on. That doesn't help you, does it?
No.
I don't. Where did you send the PDF packet?
That was a couple of meetings ago. It had everything in it.
Oh, yeah, then I will see that.
Okay.
A couple of meetings ago, I will pull that up.
It had all the presentations, and it pretty much had everything. So,
October
Okay,
4th,
got
Dan.
it.
so the school board, similar to the town, the select board, they are the ones who determine the default budget. This is the budget that, should the proposed budget fail, this is, this is the budget that would take its place in order to continue the operations of the school district. You'll see this quite a bit on here, but again, I don't set the default budget, neither does the superintendent of schools. We certainly converse about what we think belongs in it or what doesn't belong in it. Ultimately, it's the school board that has to vote on adopting a default budget. But what I tried to do for you in this handout was just to try to demonstrate some of the bigger items. Some of them are kind of no-brainers, others are not, but that's for you to decide. So the first two items on your sheet have to do with the bond here at the high school. So we just made our final principal and interest payment for that bond. So we previously had $555,000 for the bond principal, a little over almost $12,500 in interest. So again, no more bond payment. That comes out. That's pretty no-brainer. Same thing below. We made our final payment on a modular lease at Maple and Bartlett. That was a little over $126,000. To me, again, no-brainer. Take it out of the default. The next one is something that is in the default budget, but again, based upon my interpretation of it, but we are mandated by state law to do cistern inspections. So these are like similar to Mountain View Middle School. We have to make sure that they're functional, that there's no leaks. It's mandated by the state in terms of audited by the fire marshal. So we have estimated that inspection to be about $12,000, and I did include it. You'll recall that we did 2 appraisals for the area agreement, one at Mountain View and one at the high school. That was a one-time expense. That's no need for that to reoccur. That comes out. Similar to last year, Allard Park maintenance, this is an ongoing, we are able to use Allard Park for our junior varsity baseball program because we don't have any fields in Goffstown. Either the school nor the town owns a 90-foot baseball diamond. So the high school plays at Lions Field, the JV team plays at Allard Park, and part of our agreement with them is that we will contribute $5,000 towards field maintenance, seeding, fertilizing, weed control, watering, etc. I believe that's an ongoing annual expense. We've done this for years. I included it. The next one is relative to a New Hampshire Senate bill, which is 276. This is Naviance, is your software for career readiness, and this is part of this, a Senate bill that passed in which all students will be prepared in terms of assessments for career and career preparation, and I included that. Increase in sped transportation of about 25,000, I included that. We have an ongoing annual effort in terms of our FM amplification systems at Bartlett, where we are installing 2 a year. I included that. Our retirement stipends, and I'm going to talk to you a little bit later when we go through the budget. I included that because it's contractual per our collective bargaining agreements. Our computer lab replacements, it's an ongoing cycle where we're trying to replace computer labs, and right now we have 1 of them in there, and every year it's been a different lab here at the high school that we replace. I included that. During our presentations, the superintendent mentioned that superintendent and myself share the belief that increases in propane and other utilities like electricity are not part of the default, so any increase in a cost item there would be new spending. So you'll see that for the increases in propane, I put no, they're not part of the default. Suffice to say that there are school districts and towns, municipalities that use a different methodology. They believe that it's a requirement to heat a building for school purposes, and they use like 3-year averages, et cetera. Our approach is a little bit different. So you'll see that the propane and the electricity were not included in the default. We do have increased costs for special district out of placements. The state approves a 5% increase to providers that provide these services, schools that provide out of district placements. And with that, because they are mandated as part of their IEP or they're court ordered, I did include that in your default budget. And then same thing with respect to increases in special education contracted services for things like speech, OT, behavioral support, vision services. I did include that as well. So, typically and I put a footnote, is that if we have a ongoing replacement type cycle, I will include those in the default. If it's a more or less a one-time expenditure, if we were, just 1 year replacing, let's say tables here, and that was it, then I would not. But as you know, we do use, the high school in particular is a great example where we're on a cycle where we do 3 or 4 classrooms every year, because we have 50 classrooms. So we're on a continual cycle. I put that in. And so really, these are more or less the highlights of some. If we come across one where we're going through the budget and you want to have a question about that, I'm more than happy to explain why I did not include it in the default. But again, these are just highlights for you, and it's most of the bigger ticket items. Are there any questions on default?
Go ahead, Retta.
Scott, I think you've explained this before, and you always make a point of highlighting like the utilities costs and why you don't include them. We need heat to run the schools. So are these just increases, or what is you're thinking,
Yeah,
because you make a
what-
point every year
so-
to bring this up.
My interpretation is that the default budget is your current year's budget, plus or minus any contractual increases, and/or you have to then, you would subtract any one-time expenditures. So when I look at the default, I interpret it that it's your current budget, dollar amount, not gallons used, not on a consumption of fuel basis, but on a dollar amount basis. Others take a different approach, and that's fair, but that's my interpretation of it, and it is the superintendent. So if the price of propane went up, which it did, I would consider that new spending.
Or down.
Or down, in the case of, yeah.
So typically
possible.
with energy, we don't often talk about prices going down, but correspondingly, if the price went down, the same would be the case.
And on the energy side of things, it's almost $100,000 of your new spending is related to energy, close to it. Yeah. For whatever that's worth. But ultimately, you decide, not me. But that's just my interpretation. And I know this has been a discussion I've talked about since I've been here. So that's kind of where we're at with that one.
Hang on, Scott. Go ahead, Jerry. Oh, Dan?
Yep. Basically, RSA 40:13, Roman 9, parenthetical B. Default budget, as used in this subdivision, means the amount of the same appropriations as contained in the operating budget authorized for the previous year. Then it goes on and talks about increases and decreases and stuff, and then the words say, and other obligations previously incurred or mandated by law. Some people, what Scott was alluding to, said obligations. And people say, well, we have an obligation to do this, or we have an obligation to do that. When I talked to the legislators many, many years ago who actually wrote this and put it into play, they said the obligations weren't meant for obligated by law, and that's why they put mandated by law. Obligations were those obligations that were meant for contractual things that were in your budget. And if the prices for doing whatever you want go up and down, that doesn't affect the default. It affects what the people will vote for or support or not support. That's my tidbit.
Thank you, Dan. Go ahead, Jared.
I know this is a moot point for this budget, but I want to concentrate on the appraisals for the area agreement. If we had to do an appraisal, would that be part of the default? Because that would be something that the voters approved.
Yes.
Okay, so.
Which it was last year.
So-
So it was part of the default budget in last year's budget because the area agreement mandated it and the voters approved it.
And it's not part of this year's default, so. if
Because
for
it was a
some-
one-time expense.
Because it was a one-time expense, but if the voters for some reason didn't approve our proposed budget, it would default back to the default budget, which is based on the current operating year, and that money is in the current operating year.
It is in the current operating year, but I removed it from the default.
Because it was only supposed to be for that one particular year.
Correct. So it's been removed. Right.
Which brings up something interesting. It's mandated by the area agreement, and,
Every 5 years, it's mandated.
never mind.
Only one time.
Right, okay, never mind.
Jared, are you set?
We're good, thank you.
Anyone else? Questions for Scott on this? Go ahead. Yeah, go ahead.
I don't have my copy of that, actually, so I was just wondering, do you have an extra copy of that yellow sheet? I have everything else.
Yeah.
You need one too?
If you want to hop over here, I have some extra, I don't know, yeah, there you go. For you, sir? Yes, anything. All right. So, I wanted to at least, review that. At some point in this budget process, you do have to take a vote on the default budget. You don't need to do it tonight, you don't need to do it on Wednesday, but over the next couple of months, you will have to vote, to bring that forward, because that's something that this board has to sign off on. Any questions on the default or default budget overall, or any questions on that? Okay. So, as we go through the budget, you have we provide you as the school board copies of the actuals and the notes, but I think it's fair that we'll pick one document. I propose that we go through the actuals. We can always look at the notes for reference, or I can look at the notes if you have any questions. And what I did is every number, it's printed on both sides. You'll notice all the way to the left, you'll see a reference number. So if you do have a question, it would be helpful to say, I'm on page number 13, reference line number 296. And then that'll be helpful when we have a discussion over that. They don't match up, the reference lines, and I think we've talked about our software, how it doesn't allow us to do a lot of things, so this is about as good as we can get it. The one thing that I wanted, and I mentioned this in our budget presentations, is that when I take a look at your spending, what the district has spent over prior years, I take a look at what we do last year, what we do the year before and the year before that, and you'll see that you have actuals from 2019, 20, and 21. Then I did a 3-year average, and I looked at that, and then I talked to Jared at the last time we were doing this, and then I used a 3-year weighted average, and I weighted it, more weight given to the closest year, but then because of COVID, this is like wackiness. So what I'm sharing with you as the school board, and I'll share with the budget committee, which I think I already have, is that we'll take a look at the actuals, and I know Jared has mentioned the same thing to the budget committee, but COVID has thrown a massive monkey wrench into this. Items where lines that we typically would spend X amount of money, we haven't, and vice versa. So the most important thing that I want for the board, the budget committee, but most importantly the community to understand is that we're putting forth what's our reasonable and best vision of what we think it's going to cost. If it ends up costing less, then there will be unassigned fund balance money, and as the last few years, that monies will be returned to the taxpayer. So if anything, if you do make a boo-boo and we err on the side of it becoming in too high, then the money ultimately gets returned. So over the last couple of years with COVID, we have underspent our budget on things like transportation, in some cases paraprofessionals or teachers, athletics, but at the end of the day, those dollars ultimately went back to offsetting the tax rate. So could you say, oh my gosh, I think for the last couple of years we should just cut the budget by X percentage? You could, and you'd have a one-time relief. It wouldn't do you any good after that. And what my ultimate goal is, and Brian and I talked about this, is we want to have the most stable tax rate that we can, not have these wild EKG-like fluctuations where you're having a $10 million return one year, then it spikes the next. And that's why when we talk down the road in a few weeks about going from a 2.5% to a 5% contingency fund, it gives us so much of a tool to, when you have a year, which I think this year might be, where we have potentially monies left over, you put it in that fund, and then you can just lower the tax rate from that, similar to what the selectmen were able to do. So it gives you so much more to keep the tax rate stable and not have, like I had projected almost a 90 to $1 increase. I think we're going to come in either at a level school tax rate or even slightly less. So that's great for 1 year, but then when things change, then it spikes. That's not good either. So you want to keep it as steady as you can. So in my perfect world, I'd rather see 50-cent increases than see, $1 increase, a $2 decrease. It's not good for people's escrow accounts and their mortgages. It's just not good. So with that, I'll come off my soapbox. If we look at actuals, you're going to ask questions on these. I'm sorry, Jenny.
You know,
Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't see your hand up.
No, that's okay. I just have a question on the actuals. When we worked over our budgets or worked on making things balance out for things we needed, we did a lot of transfers, budget transfers.
Right.
So, are those going to affect the real truth of actuals?
Yeah, let me, that's a good question.
Do you know what I mean?
Yeah,
Where
so-
we took money from here and put it there.
So-
So now the actuals,
The actuals are going to reflect the actual spending.
right.
But the budget is simply what is the current year's budget. So that does not change. So let me give you, try to give you like an example of one. So let's just say in transportation, we spent less in transportation, but yet we spent more in a co-curricular line because we did a transfer. You
Right.
might see that co-curricular line overspent in that one particular year. But in this current budget, I didn't increase the budget to that overspent money. It was just what the budget was from this current year.
But I
Even though
know
we did a budget transfer.
a lot of times when we in the budget committee go through this, they say, well, the actual is this.
Right.
And you're asking for this for next year, and they don't match up.
Right, so
And
I'm going to
then,
give you an
so-
example of one just right on the first page. So if you look at page 1, and we'll go to line number 9, which is your teacher sub salaries. So you'll see that in 2019, we had actuals of 295, almost 296,000. Then in 2020, it was 154,000 and change. And then last year, it was 325,737. Now, why? Well, I'll give you the reasons. In 2019, you're not going to remember this, but we had a lot more long-term subs than what we might ordinarily have. All right? When you have a long-term sub, you might have teachers who might be on a long-term medical. It could be maternity leaves. It could be a whole host of things, okay? And then in 2020, we didn't have any subs because we went remote as of March, all right? And you'll recall last year when the budget committee looked at this, and much to the, not with Jared not fighting it, he was like, well, you can't just look at this one year. They made a reduction of $20,000. Last year, we were at 325,737, and last year was a confluence of a lot of different things. Trying to cover teachers who were out because they weren't working due to COVID or COVID reasons. We had increase in pay. We had a whole slew of things. So we went from having a budget of 270,000 to a budget of 250,000, and I'm proposing to go back to 270,000 to see where our normalcy is. Now, some people could say, hey, we should go right to 3.25, at least go to 300, and you'd be okay in saying all of that, but I want to be able to see like where are things trending. I know that we increased our sub pay, but in a normal year, hopefully we have one eventually. So I'm willing to go maybe a little bit shy on this one and go at 270, even though it's probably trending on the upper end. Now, we do have things like people talk about, I think it was Fred, teacher turnover money, where a higher paid teacher retires and then we hire someone who comes in at the middle or the low. You have some of that. If I made a boo-boo on this one, then those types of monies would be used to kind of offset that. We'd have to do a transfer, and that's perfectly fine. But again, this is taking a more conservative approach.
Yeah, but I think also what I'm trying to say is like, oftentimes we needed money for something. I mean, that was very easy to explain.
Right.
Sometimes we took $25,000 from like teacher salaries to put over, I don't know, in books or something.
Right.
So how is that going to match up with the actuals? Do you have like a list of those?
Yeah,
to
so what
go
you're going to
over?
see as we go through
Okay.
this, and you'll see them most pronounced in like IT. If you recall, I mean, the last 2 years, I mean, we went hog wild. In IT, we had no real backbone here, where we had to do server virtualization, we had to buy more technology, the licenses, everything costs more money. So we took some of those monies from, say, a book line. Doesn't mean that the book line is now, way less. The book line is very similar to what it's been in the past, but we did some adjustments where we took money from, say, a book line and used it for software.
Okay. Okay.
Hand raised.
Are you set, Ginny?
Yeah.
Okay, go ahead, Dan.
So in fund accounting is what we're doing. There are two sets of books, so to speak. There's the appropriation book and there's the actual book. And in our world, we kind of like, let me ask Scott before I go through the whole explanation. Did you modify the 2021 budget for the appropriation transfers that we approved?
No.
So it's not showing. So we do not see the adjusted 2021
Right.
budget the way we're looking at stuff.
Yeah, so when I roll our budget, Dan, I roll it to what the non-budget transfers were when I roll it. Because I want to get...
You roll it to what the voters approved.
Yes.
Line by line.
Yep.
At the March.
Yes, yes.
Okay, so we don't have an adjusted appropriate number to look at. So the real answer to Ginny's question is, we can't see those. We don't know where they are, because they're not in the budget line, but they show up in the actual line.
Right.
So when we compare the actual to the budget, it might look like it's overspent, or it might look like we're underspending, because we did not modify the budget to match what we wanted. But if it was a 1 year anomaly, it wouldn't matter. But if it's something that we needed, we have to explain it going forward.
Okay.
It's fair enough to say, yeah.
I'm just hoping that it comes out in the wash.
And the reason why I don't do it that way is because I use the way that our software system is set up. By rolling what the voters approved, I'm able to set that as the default. Whereas I then wouldn't, if I use what was any budget type transfers, then that really wouldn't be the default, the true default budget.
Right, it would make that process much more
Way
difficult.
more difficult to do, yeah. So are there any other questions? I'll start on page 1. So again, the teacher, on line 9, that teacher sub salary is one that, I went a little conservative on, and we might be sitting here a year from now saying, wow, we should have bumped this thing up, but I'm comfortable having that discussion next year, and if we need to, we need to. But
The other thing, Scott, is we're not finding all of the subs that we're looking for on any given day. So we may want to spend more, but we may not have the ability to spend more.
So Jared had his hand up.
Yeah,
and then-
let's go right in, start early. Line number 4 on
Okay.
our sheet here. So our actuals was $61 for 2021. Our budget was $35,000, the same for this year. Who is this actually encompassing? Because we're also adding more money to this for a line transfer from GHS.
Yeah.
So
So this is your instructional coach, which, as you know, we repurposed this year to be a nurse, a floating nurse. But, so this was a line that was moved from the high school to this district line. And with that, that was part of the default. In the high school, it would then, that position would still remain in the default because it's a full-time equivalent is a full-time equivalent. We didn't increase any full-time equivalent, so that would stay in the default.
So we're going to have an instructional coach for, we think, 2023 that would rotate through schools to assist
You got it.
with
Yes,
curriculum or
Yep.
other pieces.
right.
And I'm looking at this because we had only $35,000 in there. I can't recall why we only put $35,000 in there. Was this originally supposed to be a part-time position?
No, the $35,000 was your district teaching, it was a track pool. It was a pool of money for raises for your district employees who are not part of your collective bargaining agreements.
So this was for raises originally, but we're actually having a dedicated individual, we're projecting a warm body to be in there first.
So what you're seeing is that this line now is going to encompass two things. It's still going to be for your raises for your non-collective bargaining unit employees, as well as a position. So it's two things.
For our first part, how many people are we expecting to receive raises from this pool?
That I'd have to get back to you on. I don't know off the top of my head.
Okay.
I'd have to look at Kate's salary sheet.
Thank you.
All right, thanks, Jared. Go ahead, Amanda.
I was just going along with the teacher sub salaries. I was just going to point out that, yes, we definitely can't get enough subs for what we need, but also to just keep in mind that right now, teachers are filling a lot of those sub positions, and that's not in this number. Something to consider.
That's true.
Well,
It's not all buildings, though.
Speaking for GHS.
yeah, I think, just to recall, if I may, Ms. Chair.
Go ahead, Jared.
This process is going to be very tedious, and it's very important for us to be very targeted on the lines we're talking about, and not try to cross them with, this line isn't substitutes across the board. That line is, numbered 9 down. So when we're talking about substitutes, it's not line 4, that's line 9. So it's going to be very easy for us to confuse which lines we're talking about. So let's, when we can, if Scott, you can be very clear on specifically what the line entails, I think it would help us in our discussions.
Thank you, Jared. All right, is there any other questions on page 1, so we can move to page 2, if everybody's good?
I do have to, there is one more on page
Sure.
1 that's relatively new in terms of change of circumstance, and it really all depends on how we want to handle it, how you want to handle it collectively as a board. So you'll recall that this is the time of year when we ask for notifications of folks to notify us for retirements. So we did get more notifications of retirements where teachers and or staff would be retiring at the end of the school year, because they are then eligible per their contract to get a stipend. With that, I spoke with Kate, and she gave me revised amounts. And I'll share those with you in a second. But you should know, though, that in the last 2 to 3 years, we have been able to pay those stipends out of the current year budget due to a variety of different reasons. So I'm going to just lay that out, and I'll tell you what those numbers are. So when you look at line number 11, which is your retirement stipends, the current budget is supporting $126,000, and then our base was $173,000. Based upon information that Kate shared with me today, that number would go up to $220,000, or an increase of $47,000, because we have at least 3 more notifications this year.
I do think it's worth the board pausing and looking at this for a second. So if you look at that line, 2021 actual, 50,500, then we go up to 126 to 173. This is unfortunately the realization of what many of us predicted, which is good people who hopefully had more gas in the tank are deciding to retire. And this will be exceptionally painful for us. Losing veteran master teachers creates a void that you just can't replace with new people. So this is unfortunately, I think there will be more. I think that there could be other individuals as well. And this is very typical of what school districts are seeing, that people who are kind of close to retirement have decided, I think now's the time.
Go ahead, Jared.
So Scott, I just want to make sure I heard. So we're expecting, based on the new numbers, to need $220,000 for this line item?
Yep, and then there are some other line items below that. So not only do you pay the stipend, but now you have to worry about FICA, retirement, et cetera, workers' comp. So all in, we're looking at a little over $63,000 in just a 2-week span, just with notification. So,
So, Ms.
Go
Chair.
ahead, yeah, go ahead, Jared.
I'd like to propose an amendment to the FY23 base number, since this is contractually obligated, from 173K to 220K based on the information that Scott's given us.
Second. Okay, thank you, Jared. So I
Could
have
you
a
kindly
motion.
amend that to include the
Can we add
corresponding?
plus associated benefits?
Yes.
Yeah,
please.
Scott's just doing that.
Yeah,
Thank you.
including
Thank
associated
you.
benefits for further lines.
All right, so you amend it. Ellen, you second the amendment? All right, any other discussion before I do roll call? So that covers everything underneath, right?
Yes,
The way he said it?
I have,
Okay.
Kate provided me this afternoon with FICA, retirement, and workers' comp. The unemployment is negligible, there's no impact on
Perfect.
that.
All right, so I'm going to do roll call if there's no other questions. Retta?
Yes.
Ginny?
Yes.
Jared?
Yes.
Dan?
Yes.
Janelle? Yes. Ellen?
Yes.
Terry?
Yes.
And Heather, yes. Motion passed. All right,
All
is
right,
there any
so-
more on page one, Scott?
Nothing that I wanted to I only had a few that I had to highlight myself, and
Okay.
I have one on the next page as well.
Is everybody good to move on to page two? All right, so page two.
It's on the next page, it's a little further down. So on page 2, I think we had, I wanted to let you know that when, in talking with Steve Bourget, we did, as you know, again, but that's always good to repeat these things, is that we moved a lot of our IT positions, some of them that were, in my opinion, misclassified. And I mentioned in the presentation where our database manager and our other database support person were Goffstown High School. They really are district employees, so they were moved. So I wanted to at least, again, highlight that once more. You'll see that in terms of line number 38, this is IT maintenance, that Steve asked for a $5,000 of new spending in that particular line, and that is just to deal with the IT maintenance that we need on our system. So our systems just don't function on themselves, and he felt that was needed. And I also wanted to share with you, if you go up 2 more lines to line number 36, I should have led with this one first, so I apologize, but we're still working to get the exact numbers from the town of Goffstown, but that $84,000 is or was the cost of the SRO at Mountain View, which has now been transferred. The superintendent and myself worked on a memorandum of understanding with the police department. In the old memorandum of understanding, we had stipulated that the school district would be responsible for the entry-level cost of a police officer and their associated benefits. When we started that, Brian, what was that, 3 to 4 years ago?
Yep.
It was low 70s, okay? I just got the bill for it. It was $45,000 for a half a year. So this is a good thing. I'm still waiting to hear back what the cost of, GTV and or Parks and Rec services will be, but I think this is a good thing for everybody included, that the town will deal with the SRO, will deal with GTV support and Parks and Rec support. But I wanted you to know that you'll see a subtraction of $84,000 at Mountain View, and that's where it shows up there. Lower down, again, not everything is a positive, some
Hang
things
on
are
one second,
negatives,
Scott.
and line 45 is a negative. I'm sorry.
So Jared, did you have a question on the SRO?
Yeah, not on the SRO.
Oh, okay.
Looking at line number 28 for the teacher reimbursement, I know that in 2019, we were under the 60K. Looks like last year, we took full advantage of the teacher reimbursement to be 60,000. I guess my question would be, is this enough money? Should we be putting more money into this?
It's contractually, it's part of the teacher's
locked into
contract,
that?
it's locked in at 60.
Okay.
And the reason why it's been spent the last 2 years is that we have had what's called SNU cohorts, where folks are getting their master's degree, and that's why it's locked in. It's fully funded,
Okay.
or fully spent, I should say.
Thank you, Jared. All right, Scott, go ahead.
Yeah, so on line 45, you'll see that there was a decrease. So, and I think you saw this when we went through our presentations. Our department heads, in this case it's Steve, but in others it was principals. They went through. Jerry Gogan was another one where there were lines that she made reductions, other lines that she made, and that's really what I asked them to do, is to where should we're trying to budget what we think we need, And in some cases, it's lower, in some cases, it's more, but you gotta look through it. And I think that demonstrates that they are doing that. So I don't have anything noteworthy on page 2 to chat with you about.
Janelle, go ahead.
I just had a quick question on the substitute training reimbursement. and why
Which
that was-
line?
Line 29.
29. Okay, go ahead.
And just why it wasn't included in the future. or
Because
what that
we,
was.
it's my understanding, in terms of substitute training, is now all online. So it's web-based, so they
don't pay
don't,
for it.
we don't have to pay for that. We do pay for reimbursements on like not background, what's this, Brian, is it background checks or? There's something to do with the employment process that once they get up on board, then we reimburse them for that, but that's it.
Great, thanks.
Okay, Ellen, go ahead.
I understand that there's online training for substitutes. That would be a generic training. What about training for our specific buildings? Specific things that are not necessarily generic.
So each school gives their substitute something that might be specific to the building, like an emergency plan, things like that. But overall, the expectations of substitute are very similar. We need that type of level of consistency. But where there is a need for individuality, like the school or where kids evacuate, or what you do in the situation, that is provided at the building level for that substitute when they come into the building. As part of their packet that they get.
Thank you, Alan. Any other questions on page 2 before we move to page 3? Jared, go ahead.
Line 43, the general supplies for the technology. I think you listed this, but what specifically do we expect to use that $2,000 for?
So according to Steve, he has nothing, and I know this sounds a little bit crazy, but they do a ton of repairs. So, you know, whether it be like very small, like screwdrivers, or he needs a soldering gun or something like that. He needs those types of things, and he has Zippo.
So he has lines at the school level.
Right.
So it's
Some.
not that he has none.
Right.
So if you look at location, I just want to remind everyone, because I think we didn't expressly say this, we are at location 000, so these are the district lines.
Right.
Right.
So Jared's question about a supply line, a 611 line, there are multiple 611 lines at all the schools. So just because there's no...
But none for tech, and that was what Steve said. I have nothing for, say, technology for my folks if they need, so he, in fairness, he didn't have anything. So you'll see that he cut some lines in schools to fund that $2,000, but he needed monies for some of the things that his folks do where they're doing actual repairs. And like I said, I just gave you some examples that he shared with me, like really small screwdrivers and soldering, equipment.
Would this be like a replacement of a cable at the SAU building or something along those
Not
lines? or
necessarily, these are
switches?
more like tools in a way.
These are tools?
Yeah. Yeah. And, could it be some of those things, Jared? But that's possibly, but he shared with me it would be more the things that he needs to repair equipment, to do diagnostic testing. I don't deal with those things, but I can only imagine that you do hook up to see, hey, is this I don't know. I don't know a motherboard. Dan's probably the one who knows more about that than anybody, but there are equipment that you can do to see if a particular component is failed or not. And it's stuff like that.
But I guess my question is, this is at the district level, so this would be exclusively at the SAU building? So
No,
that type of
the district
board.
is not the SAU per se. No, the district is all schools. So there are certain things that, even though someone might be, like Betsy is a good example. Betsy's our database manager for the entire school district, but she's housed here at Goffstown High School. So she does work for the district, but she collects data on behalf of all the schools.
So let me say this a different way.
Yeah,
if I-
go ahead.
So this $2,000 that we're getting, we're looking to possibly have $2,000 reductions in other school lines to support this?
I believe that you'll see that not in supply lines per se, but in other lines that Steve is responsible for, he made reductions. And like a good example, take a look at non-capital software. He reduced that by $13,000. So, but this is not one where you're going to see $500 reduction in each school to add up to the $2,000 in district. No, this is a genuine new line.
Okay.
All set, Jared? Okay. So moving on to page 3. Scott, you got anything, or anybody have
No.
questions? Anyone have
So
questions
now
on
we're
page
in,
3?
so for those who are unfamiliar with the budget, now, we're still in the district, but now when we get to the 1200 function, that's special education. So when you get to page 4, and
Wait,
Ginny,
hang on one second,
Oh,
Scott. Jared,
okay.
go ahead.
Paraprofessional salaries at the district level.
Are you on page 3?
I'm on page 3.
What line?
So line 58.
58, okay.
Is this something, or would this be for people that go between schools, go between Glen Lake and then Bartlett from day to day? I guess, how is this line different from what would be at the school lines? 'Cause what type of paraprofessional work do we have at the district level?
I believe that this one is gonna be more of your, and Brian, correct me if I'm wrong, more of your ESY, your extended school year, where you're having you're having paras that are covering more of your all schools, but not just one school.
That's what I was thinking.
Yeah.
I'm looking at the actual, so not the one with the notes. So
Yeah.
Scott, if you get a question, if
Yeah.
the answer is in the notes, I'm not looking at the notes.
Yeah.
Another example could be if we had a highly specialized type of position that was required for an individual, we may put it in the district line. So if it's a unique outlier type position, like we've had like a language facilitator or someone who needs a sign language interpreter or something, sometimes some of those we end up putting in the district line as opposed to one of the individual school lines.
But that one I feel pretty comfortable that that's,
It is an ESY.
ESY, yeah.
ESY was what I thought it likely was, and we put all of them in the same place. So for our summer program, those costs all show up in the district line, and then when Scott does the DOE 25, he has to proportion it out. All the district expenses for the DOE 25 have to be assigned a value at the elementary, middle, or high school level.
So did we just have a drop in the 2021 actual year because of, we'll say, COVID?
Yes,
Yeah, we didn't do
we didn't do it.
we didn't do
really.
as much on-site
Right.
summer programming.
Okay.
And we did more remote.
Are you good, Jared?
Yeah, I just want to make sure we had that in our back pocket when that question's asked later.
And you're also gonna, another thing that's driving that number is you'll recall that we talked about supply and demand, what we have to pay these paras, right? So we increased our para pay to attract folks to do this. Remember, we were nervous. Do we have enough paras to run ESY? So we had to jack the rate up. So you're seeing that as, kind of a reflection that these are required for us to run the program, and we did have to pay more, for those individuals, so.
All right, so is everybody set on page 3 before we go to 4? All right, so page 4.
And I will say that anecdotally, these are really, really good questions because, as Jared knows, you're going to hear them again.
Right.
So going on to page 4, what I wanted to share with you on line number 87. So Ginny, this gets to your point in a way. So we have been budgeting around $415,000 for the last couple of years for contracted services for special ed. But you'll note that we spent $607 in 2020, $858 last year, and so in that case, we have to be a bit mindful of that one. I don't know why that 654, 430 is showing in terms of the budget, because we did do budget transfers, but when you look at what is the 2022 budget, when I roll it, you'll see that it does represent the 415 number. So that might answer what your question was. What are we going to see in terms of, numbers? But that's a perfect example of one where we keep on telling the same story, and that is if we can't hire speech pathologists or other specialty services, we have to hire contracted services. And because of that, we have to then do all these salary transfers, which we did, I think about a month ago. And we may have more, so in that particular case, what's driving that $60,000 increase is just simply their costs have gone up considerably, these vendors, over the last couple of years, whether that be vision services, hearing services, behavioral, you name it. They've all gone up, quite a bit. And I think it goes without saying that if we could hire some of these folks internally, we would, but the pool is just not there. And we're probably spending, Brian, what do you think, like at least 30% more by having to use a contractor, if not more than that.
Yeah, and it's important for the board to remember, these are all IEP required services.
Right.
So most of the time, it is always our preference to hire our own employees. But if you had a service that you only need a couple, an hour or two a week, then you don't want to hire your own person. You want to hire that contractual service by the amount of time that you need. Where we struggle is with speech in particular. That's the hardest one for us consistently to fill. And we're looking for them full-time. So we're not talking about a couple of hours here or there. We're talking about, we're looking for somebody on site 40 hours a week.
Anybody have questions on page 4 before we go to page 5? All right. We're on page 5. Scott, is there any highlights here, or anybody have any
I
questions?
don't think so.
Any questions on 5? No? All right, so we can go on 6.
Bless you.
Bless you.
And I should note on page 6, I know we've had a ton of discussions, this is line 118, about co-curricular stipends. Because this is a function of your collective bargaining agreement, that number is static the way that it is. So typically, if there, many times in your collective bargaining agreement, you'll say that stipends will go up by X percentage in year 1, 2, or 3 of a contract. If that is the case, then you would see that in there, and that's why over the years, it went, say, from 307 to 310, because there was like a 1.5% increase in the stipend amount. But it's something that is collectively bargained in that particular line.
Everybody good on page 6? Go to page 7.
Hey, Heather?
Yes, Dan, go ahead.
I think it's worthy to note that if we look at the account codes, anything that's in the 100 or 200 series has to do with most often stock prices. That's our personnel and benefits.
Right.
And since I don't have the paper, I'm working on a computer, so I'm not quite sure when you say pages, I'm only going by reference numbers. I'm thinking that some pages might all be salaries and benefits, which are pretty well fixed costs, unless Scott has got something for us.
Right.
And I say this a lot for the general public listening. We don't have to spend a lot of time on there because they're contractual.
Correct. Yeah, he gave us the budget with numbers, the page numbers, and we're still in the district. So I'm just going
But
page
do
by
you have
page.
reference numbers?
We do.
You have reference?
Yep.
Yeah, it's the reference numbers that I'm going for, like from 115 to 140 or something like that.
All right.
Or if you tell me the first reference number,
Sure.
that'll be helpful.
Okay,
Thank you.
you're welcome. We're on reference 139 to 161.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
And so just, again, more as pointers, so the function 1430, which is reference line 139, 1430 is summer school, and then you're going to progress down to 1810 and into the low 2000s, and these are like your guidance, and then you get into health, you get into speech. So just as you go through, and you do have a blue sheet that was in your packet that has all the functions until you memorize them.
Right,
Yeah, like Dan.
yeah, exactly.
Good luck.
So does anybody have any questions on page 7, reference 139 to 161? All right, so we'll move on. Oh, go ahead, Jared.
Just looking at district salaries, reference line 160 on page 7.
Okay,
Our base budget is 420K for this. That's a significant jump. And
That's your that is your IT lines that were moved over?
okay, yeah, I think it's, as Brian said, it's hard to see from the comments. I'm sure it's there. Thank you.
all right. All right, so now we're going to turn to page 8, which is reference 162 to 184. Any highlights here, Scott?
No, and as Dan mentioned, almost this entire page is all salary and benefits, so.
Yep. Any questions before we move on?
So on page 8, you know, I know this is always a contentious thing, but I feel it's important to highlight it, is on line 182, these are school board stipends. You'll see that there has been no change over the last few years with regard to the school board stipend. In terms of a percentage increase, I know that in the past that was the case. I did not include that. If you wish me to, I could certainly, it would be new spending, of course, but if this, it's always challenging when the board has to consider themselves for a raise. And I know it's extremely awkward. You know, I will tell you that in terms of the select board, when I served on that, they got whatever the collective bargaining agreements got. If that was a 3% whatever, then that's what the select board got. I say this, that I do think that what you folks do is a lot of work, and I have zero problem putting in a percentage for the school board. I just can't do that on my own, or if you want me to, I can start doing it next year, and then you can cut it, but you could just let me know. But I didn't include anything, but I can. And I know that nobody wants to say, hey, I think we should do this. I will say that if I step away from my role here, I did your job. I was on a select board. I know how much time and effort you put in. I know that these last 18 to 20 months have been the craziest of anybody's lives, and I think you folks deserve every penny you get. But that's your decision.
This would also be the place that this board has talked about in adding in stipends for teachers to sit
Right.
on the school board. Reference line 183 would be the location for
Yep.
that,
Okay.
if
Jared?
you wanted to consider that.
All right, thanks, Brian.
Just looking at our budget versus actuals, and I'm looking at actuals for 2019 and 2020. There seems to be a delta there. Is that because in your notes you say secretary stipends? Like you have
What number?
22,457.
Well, you have, you're paying stipends to a variety of folks. I don't think it's just, I think we do have hold on.
Because in the note sections, it says school board comma, clerk.
Yeah,
Right.
right.
Comma, and secretary stipends. So the budget committee, or should I say, members of the budget committee have tried to strike this completely.
Correct. They have made sometimes motions to make it zero, saying
Yes.
that you should do this out of the goodness of your heart. I appreciate that, yeah.
But I'm just trying to understand, because you have secretary stipends in there, so so this
that-
money just is the
That would
school
be
board.
stipends for Mrs. Moran
Yeah.
taking your minutes. So all of those, every meeting that she's paid for
Comes
is
out of
there.
that line.
Yeah, and so Mrs. Moran is not an elected official like everybody else. So I'm saying this more towards the budget committee and to have in our notes, because the budget committee thinks that this is only elected officials, like our moderator for the warrant and for ourselves, where it truly also includes other groups.
Right.
The other thing, and she won't be mad at me for saying this, but the secretary of our meetings has not had an increase in pay in a long time. So right now, it's $150 a meeting. So I want you to think about this, that for every hour that we're here, it takes about 2 hours, more than that. So for every hour, it's like 3 hours to do all the minutes and make corrections and get it all ready. At some point, you're gonna have to think about raising that rate.
Yeah.
Like, just to be fair. So it's, again, we don't have to do it tonight, but you might want to sleep on it. Is it something that should, yeah. And same thing, I mean, if, whether it's Amanda or whether it's another faculty member who's sitting at the table, this is where, you would have to then, if you want to have a stipend for this position, this is where you put it in the budget. In this page.
I would like to,
Go ahead, Jane.
to put that in for having our teachers' representatives have a stipend. And I think we probably need to go through the formula to.
I think you have to go through that committee, so I think, I know the superintendent is gonna talk about this tonight, but.
Yeah, okay.
We expect, he will, but I think that prior to turning this over to the budget committee, I think we might have some time to do that.
Okay.
And/or even if it becomes part of the stipend for co-curriculars, we'll have to do we'll figure it out, but there's plenty of time.
Because I think it's important. Our meetings are long lately, and there's a lot of reading to do and stuff. And if they're nice enough to work all day and then stay here
I'll tell you what,
all night, they deserve a stipend also.
I'll have a conversation with Kate as well, in terms of, we can do a little bit of digging, Brian and I, we can have that. Also take a look at our school board secretary, and you can then think about, come Wednesday, whether you want this board to have a nominal increase in stipend as well. That's your call, but we can certainly act on this on Wednesday.
I think as far as our stipend, instead of, I think I would rather do it in a year where we didn't have a teacher's contract, just because, not to bring up any more controversy in a year where we have a teacher's contract coming up.
We'll have another one next year.
It's my thought. Yeah, that's true. Never mind.
Well, Ellen had her hand up. Oh, Jared.
I was just saying, just because of the things that we're talking about, maybe it's good if we come back to 182 and 183.
On
'cause
Wednesday.
I think the secretary stipend should probably be in 183 and not the school board stipend.
It would be cleaner.
I think it would be a
Yeah.
lot cleaner, and it would be easier to differentiate when we have to later on.
Right.
Maybe get zapped.
I would agree.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Jared. Go ahead,
Very
Ellen.
good.
I was going to make a motion to the effect of what Scott said he'd bring forward.
Yeah.
That we do include, and tell me if you want me to make a motion or if that was enough, that we do in fact include a stipend for teacher reps and additional stipend for the recording secretary.
Let us.
He's going to come back on Wednesday,
Yeah,
and
okay, so
we'll
we
discuss
make a
it.
motion.
You don't need to
We want
tonight.
to use the formula.
Yeah, so we'll have numbers.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Ellen.
Okay?
Okay, so any other discussion for reference number 162 to 184? All right, so moving on to page 9, reference number 185 to 207. I think these are the same kind of things. Jared, go ahead.
Reference number 197, general supplies. I just look at our actuals, and we've consistently overspent that with the exception of COVID year. Is it really appropriate that we maintain the same funding of $3,400 for our budget?
So this is the school board's general expense line, and so for those of you who don't know, is that this would be your senior barbecue as part of that line, and some of that, so
A retreat.
retreats, board meeting, right, those types of things. So I think we're good in this one. maybe like the teacher subs, Jared, I would just say, let's let it ride one more year, see what it looks like.
Okay.
'Cause I think we tried to do certain things for the students from this line in recognition because they didn't have a lot of things. And I think the board wanted to recognize teachers and some other things that came out of this line as appreciation.
Yeah,
stuff, but-
I'm wondering, because our actuals have been significantly
Yeah.
over our budget,
Yeah.
if we should be increasing this line to coincide with what's actually going on. But we can let it ride,
Yeah,
one year, like you said.
I'll look at that one, line 197, and I'll run an audit trail on it to see where it went.
Any other questions on this page before we move on? All right, so we're gonna go to page 10, which is reference number 208 to 230. Anybody? Questions?
What is 213?
I was
School
just
board
gonna ask,
stipends?
I was just gonna ask that same question. Line 213, Scott?
Well, 2314
Oh,
is
the
different.
function.
Yes,
Look
And
at
clerk
that.
and
23,
moderator.
14.
Clerk,
That's for the moderator?
Yeah.
Oh, moderator, okay.
clerk or moderator, so it's a different.
Yep, there it is on our cheat sheet.
And then down below, you get into audit services, and then the SAU.
Okay. Oh, I see.
For line 225,
Yep.
oh, I'm sorry, no, correction. Cancel that, thank you.
Okay.
Sorry about that.
That's okay.
My mind's somewhere else on that.
No worries. All right, if everybody's good on this page, you can move on. Page 11, reference number 231 to 253. And this is administration stuff. And building operations.
Yeah, so you, down towards the bottom of the page, you get into some of the district-wide custodial and maintenance type positions.
Yep.
So some of these would be, and again, remember, location 000, so we're still
Right,
at the district.
Yep.
So this would be like our HVAC technician, that kind of position.
Go ahead, Jared.
I do apologize, I got my mind back.
You figured it out?
Yeah. On page 10, reference number 228, which is a salary pool line, I believe, for our administrative assistants at the district level. The FY '23 proposal is roughly 20% increase for our new.
On this one, this is your administrator
Yeah.
salary pool, and part of that increase is, and I can explain this, in talking with Kate, every year, we call benchmarking. We compare what our administrators are making in comparison to similarly situated administrators in surrounding school districts to make sure that we're competitive. And in doing so, we have a couple this year that are like way under where they should be. So the question is like, why is that the case? And I think, there's a couple of reasons. One, you have someone who's talented, whether they be a teacher or in your district, and you see them as an administrator. So you bring them on initially, but they have no experience. So you're getting more or less, you're getting them at that intro rate. They're new, but then after they've been with the district for say 2 or 3 years, and then now they're performing the job very well, then you look at where they are in terms of other people who've been doing the job for 3, 4, or 5 years, and you're like, whoa, we're off by $10,000, $15,000 in terms of their pay. So you'll know that we have done this routinely, and it seems as if, every year we have to revisit 1 or 2. I think this case it's 2, and if you need to, we can go into non-public at the end to tell you about that. But we do that benchmarking, and we're like, wait a second, they're not even in the ballpark. They're way lower than what they should be.
And would you explain just to the public why we do that benchmarking?
Yeah, I mean, it's not just us. So not only does every school district and municipality kind of do this, but when I was in the private sector, you have to see what you're paying as compared to the market. So whether we like it or we don't like it, we work and we live in a market system where you have to pay people a competitive wage to attract them and to retain them. And you know, we never in this district, we try to strive to be around that 50%, and that's, for some, that's not the greatest thing. Okay, there are some industries where it's like if you're in the tech industry, you might want to be at the 75. You want great talent. You're paying 75, 90% of the market. Here we're at 50%, but when you have some of our administrators in this case, but when you're at 20%, then you risk that person. Hey, I can just go one school district over, and I'm going to get a $20,000 raise. So then, what is that kind of? So you want to pay a fair wage. We're not looking to pay the highest of every school district, but we can't be at the bottom and expect, to have, qualified staff who want to be with the district, who want to, be with our students. So, like I said, we benchmark at 50%. So, and when we're that much lower, Ginny, then you have these adjustments. So when you look at that new piece, that's more or less what that means, is that.
The other piece, Scott, is because these are not approved by the voters in a collective bargaining agreement, right. We actually have to kind of do this every single year. So if Heather is our middle school principal, we would budget for a raise for her, and then when we give her her raise, that then goes in. It's always new, because it's none of this is going to be part of the default budget, because our administrators are not unionized. There's no contract that the voters are voting on.
Go ahead, Jared.
So I see in 2019, 2020, and 2021, there's no actuals listed for this.
Yeah, and that's on me, because what should happen, is there should be budget transfers to to take it from the salary pool, to that. So that sometimes skews those numbers, whether you're going to have. So we don't spend out of that salary pool. We typically budget transfer out of that number. So you should never have any actuals.
Okay, but we're saying that we need to bump this up by 20% so that we can be competitive with other school districts for our administrative assistants at the district
Not
level.
assistants, or administrators.
Administrative.
Right, yeah.
Administrative assistants. Or this is
administrators.
This is strictly administrators?
Yeah.
Because the
Our
administrative
administrative
assistants
assistants.
would be part of the collective bargaining
Yeah.
agreement.
I just want this committee to know this is going to be extremely scrutinized by the budget committee. Extremely scrutinized.
Yeah,
Yeah, and I guess I would say, with all due respect, that the last 2 years in this business for every administrator, I think we could double this number, and it wouldn't even begin to scratch the surface of what these people deserve. So I hear what you're saying as a percentage, but if you want to run a great school district, you need to have great building level administrators.
How many administrators are we talking about out of this line?
I'll get
30
you that
people.
number when I give you the other number, because I literally have to go and count up how many are in there.
Just be prepared, because I know it's going to come up at the budget committee. They're going to target this number, so making
that's
sure
fine.
that
I
we
mean,
have
I
a
think-
great communication
I
ready to
think
go.
on the flip side of this, and the superintendent mentioned it, and I'll mention it twice then, we're fortunate that we don't have an administrative collective bargaining unit, because you'd have another union that you're going to be negotiating with. So when you take a look, and I've seen the data, you just go 15 miles north to Concord, and they're paying elementary school principals like 20% more than our middle school. I mean, it's crazy. So again, we don't strive to be at 75 to 90%. We are right around that 50% mark. And I have no problem, defending this one, and if need be, Jared will arm you with data of what other administrators are making, across the state, because, I happen to be a free market type person, and this is what the market is bearing.
But,
I'm
yeah.
sorry to say, but,
Let's make sure we have that information ready to
Yeah.
go, is what I'm saying.
Absolutely.
Because it's
Absolutely.
going to come up.
And yes, I know, I heard you, Dan. Hang on one second, Jimmy. Go ahead, Dan.
So if we could, Scott, not only a count of people, can you get the total salary budget for 2023 for everyone that's covered under that salary pool? And that way I can take that salary pool number divided by the other one and look at the percentage difference.
Yeah.
That'll be helpful, I believe, and it will also help Jared, or it might not. We'll see.
Thanks, Dan. All right, Jenny, go ahead.
And I think we strive to keep continuity with our administrators, because I think our schools are much better if we're not, having turnover of administrators all the time. And it's also expensive to get people on board, especially at that level. So I think that's part of the reason why the benchmarking is so important. It saves us money in the long run, I think.
True. Thank you, Jenny. Go ahead, Terry.
One thing to look at with that too is the cost of attrition and replacing administrators. The 20% may seem like a high number, but we need to factor in what it takes to then fill those positions from recruiting and additional salaries, bring those people in, and it may be well above what we're trying to benchmark on this basis.
All right. So we did move to 11 if we're good with 10. So we're on page 11 again, reference number 231 to 253. Anybody have any questions? This is still administration and, like we said before, grounds, building operations.
Yep.
All right, so we're going to move on, if everybody's good, to the next page, page 12, which is reference 254 to 276. This is continuing building operations.
So on this one, I have to make a change on line 272, property insurance. While I was out last week, I actually got our rate from Primex, and my guesstimate was off by a little bit. Not a whole lot, but so you'll see that I reduced it by 15,000 to net out at 116,691. I need to reduce it only by $12,996, so it's a change of $2,004 because our actual is going to be that 118 number. So
What's the new number, please?
I need. You see in the new column,
Yep.
I have minus 15,000. The
Yep.
new number would be negative 12,996. That's just based upon
Okay, making the
Primex's.
new proposed.
114,687, I believe.
Thank you.
No.
No?
No, doesn't it go up?
Yeah, 118.
Oh, yeah, you're right. I was getting some track. Anyway,
Scott, what is it, 118?
Yeah, I have the Primex thing here somewhere. but-
118,695.
That's right, we got our math teacher here.
yeah. I'll make that motion as presented.
All right, so motion
Second.
by Jared, and I have a second by Ellen. Any other discussion before I do roll call? All right, seeing none. Retta?
Yes.
Ginny?
Yes.
Jared?
Yes.
Dan?
Yes.
Janelle?
Yes.
Ellen?
Yes.
Terry?
Yes.
And Heather, yes. Motion passed. All right. So if we're good with page 12, we'll move to page 13, which is reference number 277 to 299.
So on this one, I wanted to let you know that on line 286, there's a reduction there of 16,142. The reason why there's a reduction is I went with the lowest possible bus run number in the contract, which is 22. So we had as many as 23 bus routes, so I bumped it down to 22 bus routes. For the last year and this year, we've been lucky to have 18. So I can't budget 18. I have to budget the contractual minimal, which is 22, and that's why you saw a $16,000 reduction for regular ed.
Go ahead, Jared.
Question, because I don't know why I didn't think of this before, but for student transportation for the sending district, we don't budget for that in our line, correct?
No.
Okay.
They do. And then right below it, you're gonna see a little bump of 25,000 to the default. I mentioned that earlier, and that was special ed transportation.
All right, any other questions on this page?
Homework.
Do you have a question, Janelle?
I was just, sorry, just looking for
No.
clarification on what.
288 is not, the line 288?
288?
I didn't hear what you said when you said
Oh.
what line you were just.
Oh,
reading
I
off.
apologize. That was 287, so special
The
ed.
special ed was
So
287.
that
That's
one I
what I
put in
was-
the default, when I reviewed the default budget, I was mentioning that, so I'm sorry.
Go ahead, Ellen.
Line reference 296, it says non-teacher tuition reimbursement, assuming that's the paras or secretaries? Is that,
2834.
20,
Yeah, I'm looking at the function.
That one also. is
2834,
That's also
yeah.
contractual,
Contractual
GESS.
okay, and
Yeah.
the reason the actual was so low, I'm assuming, is because of the pandemic.
Yeah, and that's just an indication of like, I would think, but they have the opportunity to use up to $9,500 for education.
Okay, thank you.
All right, so we're moving on to page 14, reference 300 to 322. So the first few lines, we finish the district before we get into Bartlett. So let's finish the district, and then if there's no more questions on district, we
So
can move to
I
Bartlett.
had one, this is just for Jared.
Yep.
For everybody, but more so for Jared, because
Fund
it came up.
transfers?
What?
Fund transfers,
Yeah,
the
yeah,
dollar?
yeah. So
Good.
Yep.
I had thought erroneously, I admit when I make mistakes, that all I needed was like $1 in like the 5,000s, $1 in the 4,000 function lines. But I went to a seminar, and I think I called Jared afterwards. I'm like, oh no, this attorney said, no, you need $1 in every corresponding MS-25 line. So if it's 4,300, 4,400, and then you'll see down here, the reason why I put $1 in, it was for food service transfer. Well, we made food service transfer, so I need $1 in the food service transfer line. So if it's listed on that MS form, I put $1 in. I think with the exception of one that I don't think we're going to use, but there's $1 in every one of them, just in case we have to do a fund transfer.
So just reinforcing that, reference line item 306, this is strictly for our normal warrant articles for a capital reserve fund.
Right.
We're saying that we shall keep at least $1 in our base, because I know that some people
Right,
might try to cut
because
that.
if we deposit into that capital reserve fund, I need to transfer it in. Yep.
Thank you, Jared.
Thank you.
All right, so district is the top. We're gonna start onto Bartlett, which is the 101 location.
So going back to what Dan was saying, you're gonna see over the next, like, the bottom of page 14, so reference line 322 is all salaries. The biggie there, though, is the new integration position. So you'll see in that new column, 54,556, that's the salary for that position. And then you have the corresponding benefits, all under new, all right? Everybody understand that piece
Yep.
there? Okay, that's all I wanted to.
Jared, go ahead.
Line 308, starting right off the bat again. Why do we have money in the new column for teacher salaries? Because we're currently in the negotiation phase.
Because this is a new position, Integrationist?
Interventionist.
Interventionist, I'm sorry. Interventionist, yeah.
Interventionist.
Yeah.
Interventionist, thanks, Dan.
So this is somebody to help kids who struggle with reading and math.
And then under that is all their benefits.
Yep.
All right, so if everybody's good with page 14, we'll go on to page 15, which is reference number 323 to 345, and this is still all Bartlett and regular education. Any highlights there, Scott?
No, I
don't
would
see
say
any.
that Jerry and Vernie spent a great deal of time taking a look at this. There were, and, cutting lines that were underspent, adding lines to where they felt there was a need. So, if you recall in her presentation, she had like 2 pages of notable changes, but at the end of the day, it was like a plus of like $4,000. So she made a lot of reductions, she made some adds. The end result was not a massive increase in her budget whatsoever, but she reallocated a ton this year. So,
Go ahead, Ellen.
There's a huge
What line?
$4,000.
What
oh, I'm sorry.
reference number?
We go to reference 331,
331? Okay.
the $5,000 increase.
that was math, 05 is math supplies. And I think what she had stated there was, hold on, let me find it.
It's English.
Was it English?
05 is
I thought
English.
it was math, but,
Math is 11.
okay, hold on.
The 5,000 looks to be the WonderWorks based on the notes.
Oh,
Yeah.
right, the WonderWorks.
Is that their consumables or?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay.
So it's not a lot of money, but you see the adjustments up and down based on actuals.
Yep, you're right.
This is very, very consistent with how we do budgeting.
Yep. All right, if everybody's good on page 15, was that 15?
15.
Yep. And we'll go to page 16 with reference 346 to 368. And this is still some sped and regular ed in Bartlett. Any highlights here, Scott, for us?
No, not that I don't think so.
Any questions on this one?
We still get our insurance guaranteed maximum in November, right?
We just got it, so we budgeted at 6.2 and it came in at 6.1, which was about a $5,000 savings.
Okay, thank you. And that's what's reflected in here.
What's budgeted, what's reflected in here is the 6.2. So
Which
the
is a
overall,
10-year, which is a 10-year average.
the overall approximately $5,000 reduction was not made. It's spread across a lot of lines.
Okay. Thank you.
Thanks, Ellen. All right, we'll move on to page 17, reference number 369 to 391. And this is still regular ed, but then we get into some guidance. Scott, nothing significant here?
No, we did make a reduction there, Jerry did, of $2,000.
Yeah, the new equipment.
Yep. because
Line
we-
378,
That was an FM system that we
right.
don't need, so.
All right, if everybody is good with that, we'll move to page 18, reference 392 to 414. And this is more guidance and health.
And just so you know, we did not budget for COVID stuff.
Right.
Okay.
Anybody have any questions? No? All right, so I'll go to next page, 19, reference 415 to 437, which is still Bartlett with health and speech and professional books and media on the bottom. Any highlights there, Scott?
Just, I think in the media portion, we had kind of stuff in incorrect lines, so we try to clean that up.
That's
And
at the bottom.
so that's why you'll see that we had a reduction in, we moved one thing to the district. Destiny, we removed from the budget line, but it's part of a district line. You'll note, though, that in the next one, which is non-capital software, let me get you the line number, there was an increase. I'm looking at two different ones here. That was reference 457.
Yeah, I
Oh,
think
we're
you're
not
on-
there
Yeah,
yet.
you're on page 20.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Not there yet. Hold that thought. Go ahead, Ellen.
Have we been able to hire speech therapists, or are we also, are we
Contracting out.
It's a mix.
It's a mix, okay. How about behavior specialists? Have we been able to hire them, or are we contracting out?
Contracted.
We have-
All right, so if we're good with page 19, we'll move to page 20, which is reference 438, 460.
Yeah, so,
And go ahead,
sorry about
Scott.
that, so I jumped the gun.
That's okay.
457, we had an increase of 4135, and that was mostly to align Bartlett with Maple Avenue with respect to software that they use called Brain Pop and Brain Pop Junior. And that was the biggest driver of that one. So Maple had it for, I think, for a year or two. Bartlett didn't, or had one little piece of it. Now they both schools have the same software package. That's what drove that one.
Go ahead, do you have a question?
No, we're still on page 20. I got something lined up for 21.
Okay. Is everybody good on page 20? All right, so we can move to page 21, reference 461 to 483. And that is still, that's administration in Bartlett. Go ahead, Jared.
Line item reference number 463. So I'm getting
463.
confused because this is principal salary, and any increase I thought would be under the district line, so why do we have new spending here?
The new is from last year's.
Last year's.
So when I said that we have to, so as part of the default law, when we give someone a raise, we have to budget in the salary pool to give them a raise, and then when we give them a raise, it shows up as new spending the next year as well.
Okay, so this is
This is a raise that she's technically already gotten
already got this year.
this year.
This year.
Yes.
But it's an increase to the base.
Because it wasn't there last year, it was a
Correct.
pool.
You got it.
Sometimes I do.
I'll be honest with you, Ellen, on this one, I didn't quite understand it at first either, but-
And as luck would have it, Mrs. McGrath is here.
Yes,
So I'd be
she
happy
snuck in.
to defer any questions.
Kate, it's all yours.
Right. Ooh, she's shooting darts at you.
Those are
See
darts.
that?
That's not what darts look like.
That's sort of pleasant.
So is, anybody have, do you have another follow-up?
So, Dan, I need some help with this one. So again, if we stick on reference number 463, I understand the town didn't pass this particular budget for this particular line, but they gave the authority to the school board to make that decision for them. So why wouldn't that show up in the default line for FY '23?
You ready?
Teach me, Obi-Wan.
Okay, we're dealing with 3 different years. The budget that was passed in March of 2021 was based on the current salary of March 2021, plus any contractual obligations that we included in the previous salary pool line. So in effect, the 2579 is the movement of the money from the previous year's salary pool into the current actual salary, which is still 1 year behind next year. But it's the current year's salary for that particular line. And so it's a contractual obligation until we negotiate the following year, what's in the current year, the following year's pay, which is in the kind of like in the current year's salary pool. It's always off a little bit, but that's why it's sitting in there for default.
So it's possible that if we had a committee that was not happy, they could double cut. They could cut not only our district line that contains the raises for the next year, but they could potentially cut this line as well, which would be almost like a double cut for our.
They could cut the positions.
That, yeah, well,
They could cut the position.
they could cut the line item, but that wouldn't necessarily cut the position.
Well,
Correct.
they could drop the line, the amount in the line to 0.
Yeah, but buy-in, they cannot cut a position. The budget committee has no authority of cutting positions. They can only cut the funding
Right.
for positions.
They can say,
And then the school board and its authority, or the town has the authority of transferring funds to reestablish the payment.
If it could be done.
But it has to come from someplace else.
Right.
Go ahead, Ellen.
the people at deliberative session can put back in or take out what they see fit, regardless of what the budget committee does.
Up to 10%.
Correct, right? Yes. So the people
That's the
get to
process.
say,
Right,
okay. Should something like that happen, it won't.
right. All right, any more questions on page 21 for Bartlett? All right, seeing none, we'll go to page 22. Reference number 484 to 506. This is more administration and building operations. All right, do you have a question? Go ahead,
Yeah,
Jared.
just, it might be under the notes section, I'm sure somebody will go there. Reference line 505 for the maintenance. I know that the non-COVID year, we were under 20 grand. COVID year kind of spiked us a little bit, but it looks like we're trying to continue to raise this. Is this, why do we
Yeah,
have
so
a high number?
In
compared
the
to our-
notes, it was $100 more, so it went up 1,100 for that line, right?
Yeah.
$100 more for elevator inspections, and then the other one was mandatory asbestos testing that we have to do for 1,000. I think that's what my recollection, let me just double check.
I'm just worried because there's a fluctuation between the three actuals, the 3-year actuals there. It just might invite conversation.
Yeah, so I just checked the notes, so it was $100 for the Stanley elevator maintenance, and then another $1,000 for pretty much asbestos testing.
So is the,
Good.
sorry,
Oh, Janelle, do you have a question?
I was just gonna follow up.
Yeah, go ahead.
So the jump from 2020 to to 2021, that huge jump, if I'm hearing Jared, are we expecting that level of need in our schools next year?
Yeah, so I think what you saw was, if you look at your notes, what Randy did was he tried to delineate, like, what are the things that you still have to do. It ranges from fire extinguisher inspections, elevator inspections, roof inspections, playground maintenance that has to be done, sprinkler. I'll tell you, we've spent a ton of money on our fire suppression systems. It's amazing how much is there. HVAC maintenance, that type of thing. So we were just talking about 100 years of Bartlett. That school is an old school, and you're gonna have repairs there all the time. So I think that's the new normal. So I think you're looking at easily $25,000 a year of maintenance in that school. There's no doubt.
Right. Hang on one second, Dan. Hang on, Ellen had her hand up. Go ahead, Ellen.
However, all those maintenance items, the inspections and all, and Bartlett, were there for the actuals of 2019 and 2020. Right?
No.
No.
And I say that because I do not believe Randy and Dawn did that in last year's budget prep. So, because I remember that we didn't have it, and then last year they in your notes section on page 26, every school you'll see where they have elevator, you name it, where they're putting everything that they know.
In our notes, it starts on page 25 and goes into page 26. There's a line item detail for what the maintenance items are in their notes section.
Yeah, and I think what happened was it was also really good for them to say, oh, we need to do this every year. So, like, we already know, right? Remember, like, 2 years ago, we hadn't done a rigging inspection in a while? Well, you got to budget this stuff so that you know that you have to do this stuff on an annual basis. And so Randy and Dawn did a very, very comprehensive look at our maintenance in particular to put down everything that we needed. And then there are more things that so the most recent one was asbestos testing that has to get done at our schools. The cistern inspection, all these things are all required that we have to do.
Ellen, you had a follow-up question?
Yes, please.
Go ahead.
You now got me looking at both packets of the actuals and the notes. So the 2021 actual is not necessarily due to COVID, but to putting in this line all these required inspections.
Yes.
So it's not a COVID.
I don't think this is not a COVID related.
Okay, so what we did.
The maintenance is not COVID, no.
But the reduction in 2020
Yes.
could have been.
Could have been.
Because we may not have been able to procure certain services from March of 20.
We couldn't get people in the buildings, Brian.
Right.
We couldn't, I mean, like, the
That's what I'm
schools were
saying.
closed, nobody was coming in and out of these places. They were like persona non grata. So you weren't having anything done.
Okay.
So are you
kinda
set,
stayed.
Ellen? Because I know Dan
So
has
the
a question.
2021 actual, that is such a big jump from what was budgeted, what's that, 13,000, is due to putting in this line appropriately all the required inspections that previously weren't in here. I don't know where they were or how we paid them, but now they're in there. And as I go across, it looks like it's being reduced?
No,
No,
it
they went
changes or fluctuates every year. So
Okay.
if you look at, these are gonna go up and down depending on what you have to do. So
That following year? Okay.
Right,
Okay.
and so the 2020 actual that shows 13,221, that's how much we spent, that's not how much we budgeted.
Right. Okay.
Are you good?
I think I'm good.
Okay. Thanks, Ellen. Go ahead, Dan.
It's just pretty much a reiteration of what was said after I said I wanted to say something. If you go back a couple of years and look, this line wasn't totally funded or budgeted, and some of the expenses that we're doing now, were hidden someplace else. And I think over the years, we consolidated and tried to put them where they belong, along with some of the other things we've heard. So I don't have a problem with how this is currently being budgeted.
Okay.
Thank you, Dan.
I would just take an exception to the word hiding. I don't think that's what Dan meant. They were allocated in different places.
Right.
And they were, as we always do every year, trying
Clean
to
it
put
up.
things in their proper baskets.
Right, absolutely.
If I use the word hiding, that was improper. It was like, we don't know where they are at the moment, but we know they were expended where we had intended to expend it, where they had been budgeted in those previous years.
Right. Thank you, Dan. All right, so if we're good with page 22, nope, Jared, go ahead.
Just looking under maintenance, and I'm
What
going to use
line?
a different term for reference line
505?
505.
Okay.
You know, Ellen has used the term mini CIP for those items that are under 25,000.
Mm-hmm.
Is this looking at that mini CIP that Ellen keeps referring to say these are scheduled repairs we have at Bartlett?
It would be repairs, not necessarily maintenance. So yeah, I mean, I think we definitely look at that, but so many.
Well, this line is specifically, it says repairs.
I
And I
got
know that
that.
you have line items there.
And what, I wish Randy was here to speak to this, but I will share with you that Randy and myself, we look at these repair lines very holistically in terms of the schools. Meaning that, to give you a good example, we had to deal with our vaporizers here at the high school to the tune of like $30,000. So that when we fire up the boilers for propane, it eliminates the moisture, as we've had to then switch to oil, et cetera. So they were in a failure mode over the summertime. I think it was $25,000 or $30,000. We had to do it. Now, what that might mean is that there might be some repairs at another school that, hey, it'd be nice to do, but we don't do them because, so you might see an over expenditure in one school in a given year and an under expenditure in the other, because Randy looks at it very holistically, as do we all.
When I look at my notes page, you know, I'm looking under this line that we're going to be doing a bathroom repairs of $5,500. Would that be something that would have been scheduled on that mini CIP to say we need to do bathroom
Not necessarily,
repairs?
because the bathroom remodeling is way, way more than this. But what it might mean is that he has to replace, you know, a toilet, or like, we know what we dealt with the TikTok thing, right? Those were like $3,000-4,000 worth of damages, you know? When you have to call a plumber in, you know, we had issues here. So some has to get paid.
So these aren't scheduled repairs,
No,
these are,
these are more reactive repairs, not always scheduled.
but we always have to replace a toilet every year, for instance.
Or you, like Randy knows based upon history, that I typically do, you know, we always have these electrical issues, we always have these plumbing issues, and he looks at that, you know. And I will tell you that if you look overall, he's pretty much spot on in terms of, you know, of what we spend. When you look at, if I was to run a report on all of the all of the lines from all the schools, which I can do, I bet you it's pretty darn close to what we budgeted. But we might underspend at Bartlett one year and spend more at Maple, and then on the flip year, we spend more at Mountain View and less at the high school, and it's just all over the board. But you just don't know what you're gonna get.
So the past 2 years, we significantly underspent this line by about 50%. And we think that might be due because we didn't have individuals in the buildings.
In COVID years, that was an issue.
Okay.
Yeah.
You're all set, Jared? Okay, great, thanks, Jared. All right, so we're gonna move on to page 23, reference number 507 to 529. This is still Bartlett. Building operations and equipment maintenance. Any highlights here, Scott? I didn't see any.
I don't think so.
There's a reduction in new furniture.
Furniture,
Yeah,
because we
516.
used a grant, so I removed that.
we don't need to replace something of the same value next year?
That's great.
Well, we used grant money to replace furniture, and I think what we're looking to do, it was called new furniture, so we got replacement furniture if you go a few lines down, where we're still looking to deal with teachers' desks and storage cabinets, et cetera, and put them on a cycle, but we just bought a ton of new desks, student
Right.
desks. So now it just shifts to more the teacher stuff.
Jared?
Just looking at reference number 511, 512, natural gas, electricity, it looks like these are level funded. I thought these were supposed to have
Yeah,
new funding associated with them.
So, I mentioned in my proposal that electricity at Bartlett, I'm okay with. It's electricity at
Glen Lake, I know, is
Glen
going to
Lake.
spike.
Right, because they're electric portables. The natural gas piece, I think we're gonna overspend the line based upon what the prices are this year. I don't know if you've read about it, but natural gas prices are increasing. But I'm holding steady. We don't use a ton of it, so I'm just gonna, if need be, we'll absorb it. So I'm trying to be conservative in that one too, not going too crazy on the budgeting.
So our funding mechanisms for Bartlett, I'm sorry, our heating mechanism for Bartlett is both propane and natural gas.
No, it's just natural, the
only-
two main boilers in the school run on
Natural
natural gas, and they're the only two boilers we have that run on natural
The
gas.
portable is the only thing that
Yep.
uses propane.
They're two small propane bottles for not the library, the other modular.
I just consistently, we're saying that electricity is going to be more, but yet we're not budgeting here. Just, it's not jiving with our strategy and what we've said. Just the point of
He's got
emphasis.
$100,000 in this budget somewhere. It's gonna show up sooner or later.
Yeah, I mean,
Is that $100,000 in other schools?
it's in terms of the energy use, yeah, it's in other schools.
Yeah, so
okay.
we're gonna see, in those same lines, in the other locations, we're gonna see $100,000,
Spiking up.
yes.
But just Bartlett, we're pretty even Steven at this point.
And natural gas has been the most stable of them.
Hi. Yes, it is. You can have a seat anywhere. Thank you. Go ahead, Dan.
Actually, I'm looking at every account 622 in each school, and there's only 10,000 at Glen Lake and another 10,000 at the high school.
Yeah, so that's the 10,000 in electricity. I think you're gonna also see, you should see increases in the 623 line.
Okay.
So I think you'll see it there.
The 623 line has another 66,000.
Yep, so that 60 plus the 20 there's their 86,000 of new energy spending.
Yep.
And Scott, I'm guessing at the high school, you probably have, when we get to the high school, you'll have an increase in oil in the 624 line, because the high school is dual fuel, and when Scott mentioned the vaporizer, we have to be careful talking about vaping at the high school. That tends to lead to other perceptions. But when it's really cold at the high school here, we flip the boilers onto oil because the oil burns better when it's really cold.
And that's interesting because I don't see any budget at all for oil at the high school. We'll get there.
We'll get there. We're still at Bartlett. Yeah, you're good? Okay. So is there any other questions on page 23 before we move on? All right, so let's move on to page 24.
Just as a reminder of the chair, it is 8 o'clock.
Yes, yep. Thank you, Jared. Reference 530 to 552. The first two are just the end of Bartlett, and we still have a full board meeting to do tonight, so I was gonna stop it. We were hoping to get through Maple, but we have a lot on the agenda, and Wednesday night is just for budget workshop unless something comes up. So if there's any questions at the top for Bartlett, why don't we finish that up, and then we'll start Maple on Wednesday if everybody's in agreement with that.
Works for me.
All right, any questions on Bartlett at the top?
Should we have a dollar in this line item
You don't need a dollar
for fund transfers?
in a,
530?
no, because as long as I have it in any fund transfer line, then I'm okay. So if I had it in the district level, Jared, then I'm okay.
Okay.
As long as I have that function covered, then I'm,
So you just need a district deal? Okay,
Yeah.
I'm good.
yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah,
Right.
the fun part is matching to the MS 25. And these, we have many, many more lines on here than what the 25 has.
All right, so that concludes budget workshop tonight. Get all my papers here. And we're gonna continue on with our board meeting. First is public comment. Do we have any public comment? All right, seeing none, I will move on. Accommodations, good news. Caleb?
So first, as you may know, the high school last week was homecoming, and it's our first in-person homecoming since 2019. We were outside in the back field. The outdoor venue, I think, worked quite well. And so just the student council and administration, they did a really great job with it. I think it went super smoothly. And just thank you. It was a nice way to, at least for me, have a senior year.
Good.
And also on Thursday was at the high school, the first fall concert since the first in-person concert since 2019. The performers were all masked, but it was still done quite well.
Great, thank you, Caleb. And you guys had a perfect week last week for all the festivities at school. It was gorgeous. Mrs. Nix?
I wanted to reinforce the same thing. We had a wonderful homecoming week. I must say, all of our students were very, very impressive, especially the school spirit was amazing. And then on Friday, we were able to spend the whole afternoon outdoors. So you can imagine the whole school outside on the field. It was so tremendously organized by our senior advisors and our senior class leaders. It was really impressive, and it was a really great time for everybody.
Yeah, it sounded like it. I could hear the music. It definitely sounded like a lot of fun. Anyone else with accommodations, good news? Go ahead, Jenny.
Yeah. I would just like to thank two young ladies who have been reporting on the schools for the New Boston paper. Marlena Roach for Goffstown High School and Emily Bynum for Mountain View. They always, every month, do an article, and they're really quite good. They do a nice job and keeps the...
It's a lot of work for them to do that, too.
It is.
Meeting the deadlines and,
Absolutely.
yeah, they
And
do a nice job.
They do a nice job.
Thank you, Jenny.
We always
Appreciate
wish
that.
the Goffstown News would have one instead of Hooksett, but what can you do?
Any other accommodations, good news? All right, seeing none, I'll move on to the approval. We have two. We have October 4th and October 6th school board meeting minutes. So let's start with the 4th. Did anybody see anything?
Move the approval of October 4th as presented.
Thank you, Jared. Do I have a second?
Second.
Was that Janelle? Thank you, Janelle. Any further discussion before I do roll call? All right, seeing none. Retta?
Yes.
Ginny?
Yes.
Jared?
Yes.
Dan?
Yes.
Janelle?
Yes.
Ellen?
Yes.
Terry?
Yes.
And Heather, yes. Motion passed. So now we have the October 6th. Anybody see anything?
Make a motion to accept as presented.
Thank you, Jared. Do I have a second?
Second.
By Janelle. Any discussion? Okay, seeing none. Retta?
Yes.
Ginny?
Yes.
Jared?
Yes.
Dan?
Yes.
Janelle?
Yes.
Ellen?
Yes.
Terry?
Abstain.
Abstaining. And Heather, yes. So we have one abstention and the rest, yes. All right, moving on to committee reports. Scott?
Sure,
Manifest?
you have your manifest tonight in the amount of $1,881,763.92. I sent out Last Friday, the manifest summary report, I'll find it in my packet here, and of which the majority of this were payroll, taxes, and benefits totaling over $1,276,000. For your special education activity, that subtotal was a little over $48,000, mostly with out-of-district tuition payments. Notable I wanted to bring to your attention was, you'll see a payment for Safe Wheels LLC. That is a new special education transportation vendor that we had to bring on. Durham has been unable, due to driver shortages, et cetera, to fulfill all of the requirements that we have. So Jennifer, our SPED director, worked with getting another vendor, and Durham was fine with that. So we just have to do what we have to do in these circumstances. Your general expenses, the most notable, obviously, is your SAU 19 expense. That was $162,000 and change for October. First American Equity, this is a good one. It's almost like when you rip up your mortgage. So that was the last payment on the Bartlett and Maple Modular. That was a 5-year lease. That's the final payment. So the party, I think, is Wednesday at the SAU, in case you want to come. That's a joke. Town of Goffstown, this is what I mentioned before. So that was 1/2 of the year, the SRO cost for that one. Goffstown Truck Center, 21,000 and change. So this is, this was the kindergarten midday transportation. So we are running 3 kindergarten buses, perhaps soon to be 4. And we also reinstituted late buses this year. So we've always had late buses, but due to COVID, we didn't. And then we were able to do that again, which is great. We talked a lot about electricity tonight, so we have been paying Eversource, Jared. I just wanted you to know that quite a bit. Home Depot Pro, custodial supplies, and then Impact Fire. They were a multitude of things. It was fire alarm servicing, sprinkler inspections, as well as some repairs after they've done some inspections. As we mentioned last week, Megan is trying to buy as many commodities as she can. As you know, we've got supply chain issues with food service, and she's trying to acquire product for us. So that's why you're seeing that a lot higher amount. On the flip side, we got notice last week, I don't have the exact amount, ballpark of $25,000 that we got as a additional revenue source from the federal government due to supply chain issues and cost increases. So the federal government, Megan was notified, I think it was last week, that we're going to be getting in the ballpark of $25,000 in revenue from the feds to deal with this, which was nice. So they allocated $1.3 million for the entire country, and we got $25,000 in change.
Awesome. Thank you, Scott. I saw Ellen's hand up.
Yes, I was going to ask about this because it's been in the news.
Okay.
That some school districts across the country, I'm not saying anywhere right here, literally have not been able to provide lunches for kids because of the food chain, what we're generally calling the food chain issue. I don't know how bad this is going to get and how or when or if it will impact us.
It already is.
Okay.
It's already impacting us, and in fact, I think at the last meeting of this board, Scott reported, and I think I added to it, Megan has been adjusting her menus because she can't get product. She's now buying commodities out. Last month, she was buying out for the month of January because she's so concerned about her ability to procure commodities when she needs them. So this is, and it's not just food, it's paper products, it's, she had shared, some of the supplies that they use, so it's not even just your food material, it's other materials that we buy, supplies, and she's very concerned about it.
Yes, and that is the reason I wanted to hear a little bit more, I do remember you said that at the last meeting, a little more explanation so the parents, the public is aware that this is a serious issue we're
Yeah,
facing now, and it could
we've-
get worse.
And we've really encouraged Megan. Megan really wants to run a great food program. So she tries to do a lot of scratch-made stuff. She tries to do a lot of creative kinds of stuff. And, we've really tried to encourage her to, this may not be the time to introduce new things. And, she's progressive and she wants to give the kids, some unique
I hope you
meal.
like pizza, Caleb.
I'm vegan.
Good, okay. I hope you like vegan pizza. Denise, I just wanted to correct the record, if I may. So we got a little over 29,000 from the feds, not 25. I just wrote the memo.
All right, thank you, Scott and Ellen. Any other questions before? Oh, sorry, Janelle, I didn't see your hand. Thank you, Jared.
Just sort of as a follow-up on that, I'm trying to ask this the best I can. Are we seeing a lot more food waste in the schools as well because of the free lunches? The reason I ask is my kids are coming home saying, oh yeah, nobody even eats your lunch, they just dump half of it in the garbage, and I don't know if that's something or not something, but with this looking down the road and sort of trying to prevent loss of food.
So the answer to that is yes and no, because the meal program still requires Megan to make sure that she has certain components of the meal on the plate. Fruits, vegetables, grains, you name it. So if the student does not like the fact that there are carrots or green beans or whatever on the plate, and they don't like carrots or green beans, and they choose to not eat it, and they decide to only eat the chicken tenders, then does that go in the garbage? The answer to that is yeah. It sometimes does. So I think the challenge is always, when you're as a parent or a guardian, when you're at home, it's like, hey, you can't have dessert unless you eat the carrots and the beans, etc. Here, it's not so much. So the kids, in some cases here at the high school, they might load up on the things that they like, order double meals, etc., and then they discard some of the things that are needed to supply a fully nutritious, USDA-approved meal. All right. So that's
I appreciate that answer,
that is the challenge.
It is quite the challenge.
And remember,
always has
this
been.
is a regulatory element that we're required to comply with. So if we can't say to the kid, do you want the carrots?
Right. They
Right.
have
You
to.
have
eat.
to
Do
give
you
it
want
to
the
them.
green beans?
Yeah.
Right.
And that's when I think a little common sense and reasonableness might hopefully prevail.
I think if Chef Balky cooked the carrots and green beans, like maybe an almondine or something, I think they would eat more of it. But that's just me, Brian. I know that you're really good in the kitchen, and it's a
Dan,
possibility.
you have something?
I just had a comment. I wanted to make sure that everybody loves their chocolate milk. And
Yes, I was waiting for you to mention that. Thank you, Dan. All right, any other questions for Scott before we do a motion to pass the manifest? All right, so I'll need a motion.
So moved.
Second.
So it's to pass the manifest in the amount of $1,881,763.92.
Second.
And second by Janelle. Sorry, Ginny.
Sorry.
Any other questions before I do roll call? All right, seeing none. Retta?
Yes.
Ginny?
Yes.
Jared?
Yes.
Dan?
Yes.
Janelle?
Yes.
Ellen?
Yes.
Terry?
Yes.
And Heather, yes. Motion passed. Anything else at this time, Scott, for you?
Yeah, I have one. So budget transfers. So you have one tonight.
That's later.
What?
That's later.
Oh, I'm sorry. Okay. I didn't even see that. Okay.
So you have anything right now?
No.
No. Okay.
Sorry about that.
That's okay. All right, so Jared, Budget Committee.
Budget Committee. So we have not met since the last time we met, but we are going to be starting up, I believe, on November 4th. The Budget Committee is meeting today to review the town, but I'll have to catch up on that on GTV since I'm going to attend this meeting versus that one.
Now, November 4th, we have a meeting, don't we have a meet? Is that not
Maybe
Monday?
I thought we'd have a meeting on November 2nd, which is a Tuesday. I thought we always started on Tuesday, but currently there is nothing on the
No, you're right.
schedule.
No, November 4th is a Thursday. I'm thinking something else. Okay, that's fine.
But just to confirm that the budget committee meetings will be here in this room
Okay.
for deliberations.
All right, thank you, Jared. Dan, did you have something?
No, sorry.
Okay.
I thought I heard you say November 1st is a Thursday, and it's really the 4th.
No, the
so-
4th. The 4th. I thought the 4th was a Monday, but it's not. All right, so PNC, Retta?
We have not met since our last meeting, and we'll meet again on November 1st, Monday.
All right, thank you. CIP, Ellen?
Yeah, we've been done, and we can take that off the agenda until next summer.
You're done meeting?
Yeah, but we can take it off the agenda until next summer.
Okay, thank you. All right, stipend committee, Ginny.
We have not met yet. I did get notification today that the committee will be getting an update on 10/28 from Wendy Kohler and Ginny Sinclair on the meetings and work that they've done. So that will be nice to finally have a meeting and for the whole committee to work together.
What kind of information would that be, Jenny?
I have no idea. We'll
She
soon,
doesn't know yet.
I have some additional information
we'll
I'll share.
find out on the 28th.
Okay. On the 28th of October?
Yep.
All right, so are we good with stipend? All right, policy review. We met last Monday, so we have some first reads later on in the agenda, but we will meet on November 8th at 5:30 at the SAU building. C&E, Ginny?
We have a meeting on November 8th at 7 o'clock at the SAU.
Perfect, thank you. Facilities Planning Committee, Jared?
We have not received our demographic review yet, but I imagine that
We did at 5:55 PM.
we received our demographic review recently.
Wow.
So
just
now
got
that we
it.
have that,
Yeah.
we will be reestablishing or reconvening our facilities meeting
Okay,
at our earliest convenience.
I just sent it to you, to the two of you.
all right, thank you, Jared. All right, SAU 19 Joint Area Subcommittee. We'll get into non-public tonight. New Boston talked last week, so we'll find out their side of stuff, and then we'll go from there. The SAU Policy Review Committee is meeting this Thursday at 5 p.m. That's 10/21 at 5 p.m. at the SAU building. And then at 6 o'clock, the full SAU board is meeting at the SAU. And I think that's it for meetings, and then superintendent's report.
Thank you. I wanted to let the board know that Senator D'Alessandro came on October 11th for his annual visit. Had the chance to take him to all of the schools as he has done every year. The fourth graders ask hard questions. So these kids, I told the senator, I said, I hope you're ready for questions about filibusters and all kinds of stuff, because the fourth graders were ready for them. They're cute. The stipend committee, so Scott, Kate, myself, and Mrs. Kohler had the chance to kind of discuss the state of the stipend committee. There are a few things, Ginny, that you can expect to hear at your meeting on the 28th. They have been collecting information, but we have not finalized and compiled all of the current co-curricular activities that are happening, so there's a final step there. We're then asking the committee for a couple of other pieces, including some recommendations around reviewing the formula that's been used. And what else did we have, Kate? If you say it to me, I'll repeat it.
So process development, how the stipends will be.
Oh, right, we had talked about developing a process. So historically, when there wasn't funding associated with being an advisor to a club or as a co-curricular, we saw a lot of those groups and activities just pop up because there was no funding associated with them. This board has a policy that you're supposed to approve all of them. That is something that we have historically, and I would say probably for 15 or more years, have not brought all of those requests to this board. I think that we should either review the policy or we should follow the policy. So what we would like to recommend is kind of a new process moving forward, that as we're identifying stipends for some of these positions, if there is a request for a new club or activity, even if there is no funding, the funding was the method that always brought it to the board. So if there was no funding associated with it, my read of the policy is you should still be approving those. So that was a piece, and then
Process to review relevance ongoing.
process to review ongoing. So we want to codify some of the elements in terms of reviewing the costs, reviewing the formula. So we've got about 3 or 4 key things that we think the committee has a little bit of work to finish up, but they're very nearly done. And I know I haven't seen kind of the whole big spreadsheet, but if there's additional work that needs to do, has to do with the sort of the compiling, what's the state of the state. And it's important for the board to remember, I do want to continue to encourage, you've made good progress on this topic. We have $23,500 worth of stipends that teachers and other folks are being paid now for work that they're doing that a couple years ago were not spoken for or agreed. And remember, these stipends are in your teacher contract. So there are layers of kind of complications associated with this. But again, I would say I think that we're making good progress, and as part of the negotiations that are ongoing, this is a topic of consideration for the ongoing negotiations.
Ellen?
Have we also tried to benchmark what other
Yes.
the stipends? Okay.
More so for the athletic ones, Ellen, because they're more common, but certainly some of the other stipends like student council or yearbook, you know, all schools have those. But I would say I think we focus more on athletics, and I think we've done some of the benchmarking. But every school's a little different. So for example, Goffstown High School, kids can take a class for yearbook, but we still pay a stipend. So we have some of those elements that I think we need to continue to work on.
My other thought was, if we could, if it would be possible or advisable to, what's the word I want, categorize or group similar types of activities that people are getting stipends for, and link the stipend to a percent of the base salary, as opposed to
So that
this.
would be a negotiation
I know, but
discussion.
it's just something that, instead of this, whatever the formula is, linking it to the contract and the different types of categories, maybe based on the amount of time needed to be the staff advisor for it, might be a much easier way to go to set up what each individual would be paid. Just a thought,
Okay.
to link it.
Thank you, Ellen. Go ahead.
Continuing
Yeah.
on. So if the board wasn't aware, I wanted to thank Mrs. McCarthy from Crispin's House. She hosted a great suicide support workshop for parents last Thursday. We had a really pretty good turnout. Joyce Lewis, our Director of School Counseling, was one of the panel members, and many thanks to Mrs. McCarthy for the work that went into that. I don't know if that is going to be shared. I had asked very clearly to have it recorded so that hopefully we could have that information that would be available afterwards. I know that they did record that, but I'm hoping that that will be something that's a project that we may see on GTV in the future. I know that I have said this, I will continue to say this, staffing is and continues to be a significant challenge for us. When we were talking about things like substitute teacher costs, every day we struggle with staffing. We struggle with finding subs, we struggle with covering classes, and this, I just want this to continue to be on the board's radar, that this continues to be a daily logistical challenge for every school. I'm going to speak in a little bit of generalities, but I want the board, I have shared over the last few meetings, that in my assessment and in the numbers of behavioral incidences that I have been a part of, we continue to see behavior ramping up across all of the schools. This is, in some ways, what we predicted would happen. Last year was a very different year. When kids went remote, they were very grateful and thankful to be back in schools. We had a cohorting model where we did not have all of our students at all times. We had about 20% of our students that were remote. With everybody back in, we have continued to have behavioral challenges. So at this point, this is something I am tracking and monitoring with all of the principals. I don't have a need at this point to give any additional information, and I don't want to create additional work to compile additional information at this point. But I would say that we have continued to have some significant incidences of behavioral concern that, again, I just want the board to be aware of. Our COVID testing program email is ready to go out tomorrow. So we will have that sent out again. This is a voluntary program for people who want to participate, and there is no cost to the community of Goffstown or New Boston, as this is a COVID state-funded program, the SAS program, which is Safer at School. So that additional information will be going out tomorrow. Some of the supports that this board, again, I would thank you for supporting our requests. Our new additional nurse is up and running and in place. And our quarantine teacher is also up and running and has just started supporting students. So this were both of these projects that we brought to this board. I thank you again for your support. Those were important supports that we've added for our students for this year. So a couple of COVID updates. The numbers as of today, the state reported 535 out of 100,000 cases over the last 14 days. Hillsborough County is at 404. There are currently 85 current school clusters with 11 current outbreaks. And New Boston has 20 current cases, Goffstown has 58. Both have been ticking up over the last several weeks. So it was just a couple of weeks ago, Goffstown was in the 30s, and we are now edging close up to 60. So currently for us, we've had 74 cases to date in our schools. It is a daily occurrence. So Mrs. Trapaz, as your board chair, as well as Mrs. Chaffee, as your SAU board chair, can share that they are notified throughout the day, throughout the weekend. I don't do it after hours, so if there's a late one, you get it in the next morning. But every single day, we continue to contend with positive COVID cases.
And then I email the full board.
So I would stop there and ask if there are any questions or anything that I can clarify for the board.
Go ahead, Dan.
Brian, of the 72 or 74 that you mentioned in our schools, does that include the New Boston number?
Yes.
Do you have it segregated?
I can give it to you right now. So it's it actually, if and this is for everyone, if you go to the SAU 19 website and you go partway down, there's a chart that says SAU 19 COVID-19 active and recovered cases, and there are two kind of little databases. One is a summary of all of the current cases, which is sitting at 76. So New Boston has had 18 cases. That is included in the 76, Dan. And then if you click on
Go ahead, Dan.
No. The problem is there's a delay in this system, so I have to be quiet. So Thank you.
You're welcome.
Yeah, so and again, any board members or any members of the public, there is a state dashboard that reports on schools. Unfortunately, it is not timely or accurate, nor has it been for the last, since it was created. So our numbers are updated every single day. So as we have new cases, we update that spreadsheet on our website every single day. So I would encourage people to go there as opposed to looking on the state dashboard. And then if you click on, there's a section that says COVID cases, there's a summary, and then there's direct COVID cases, and that the board may be interested to see that every single COVID event, I also report out on if there's any targeted masking associated with that. So if anyone wants to see, absolutely everything is right there in public every single day.
Thank you, Brian. Go ahead, Ellen.
Do we know the 58 for our schools, children in our schools, are they contracting COVID at home or in schools?
So overwhelmingly, we have seen the pattern has been that positive parents, positive kids, and we're seeing most often that COVID is spreading in the homes, and that we are seeing moms, dads, and then kids that are positive. We, thus far, have not had any clusters or any outbreaks, which is very positive, and we have seen no evidence of school-based transmission thus far.
Go ahead, Janelle.
I want to ask more about the behavioral issues in schools. I know you said briefly and you didn't want to get into it, and we're not looking at data collection or anything like that at this point. But it does concern me, and I guess I just wanted to ask a couple follow-up questions of just some general ones of if we're seeing this in other districts, like an uptick in behavioral issues, if it's COVID-related behavioral issues. I know that we put out there to say, you know, the mass bullying would not be tolerated.
Yeah,
Really,
so
that's not
if
part
I
of
can
it.
respond to a couple of those things, Janelle, I would say other districts are experiencing everything that we're experiencing, other school districts are experiencing as well. So the shortage of staff, difficulty finding subs, buses, food shortages and supply chain, all of those things, other school districts are having the exact same experience, including the behavior. So I think what we kind of saw was artificially last year, kids were spectacular. They were so happy to be in school. They were in classrooms that were small. They were very well behaved. And we knew last year that we were not seeing what our history had shown us for student behavior. I would say this year we have definitely seen an uptick. Mr. Gross referenced some of the wonderfully creative TikTok challenges that the younger generation continues to focus on. Some of those things are new and unexpected, and as is kind of the world of social media. I would say we have not seen an uptick in bullying. I've had a few instances that parents have been parents have informed me or principals of, and they have been addressed. We had a couple incidences on buses, and students were disciplined accordingly. So I think by and large, mask wearing has not been an issue for kids. So I think it continues to be more of an issue, you know, maybe for other communities. I don't know. We haven't really had any issues here with, again, I've had a couple instances where kids said they were being picked on for wearing a mask, and those were addressed. And I won't have it. As we said at the beginning of the year, that if someone wants to wear a mask for whatever circumstances, that's their right to do that, and I won't have kids saying, you know, teasing them or anything of that nature. But, you know, I think that, I think we have to just be honest and realize that our kids are struggling. And they're struggling academically. I've shared with this board very transparently that we've seen a trend of national and local data that our math scores have declined significantly. Kids are having a hard time continuing to navigate all that comes with COVID, and that includes their social emotional development. That includes sometimes kids make bad choices, and that's all part of growing up, and that's part of learning and growing, and parents need to be actively involved and helping guide and navigate their kids. But this continues to be hard on everyone, including our kids.
For sure.
You all set, Janelle?
Yep, thank you.
Okay, thanks. Go ahead, Ellen.
Just, if I remember correctly, seeing the numbers of the academic levels of our kids, language arts didn't do so great either. Math
No,
was the worst. but
actually,
arts-
language arts was pretty stable.
Yeah.
And I thought some of the things, you know, certainly writing and critical reading comprehension, I thought some of those would kind of decline.
Yeah.
But overall, our reading and kind of ELA scores have been pretty stable. But we've seen a significant national decline, which is represented right in our local data of math.
Yeah, and just be aware, that doesn't end at the end of the school year.
This will take years.
This will take years.
This will take years to continue to remediate
Yep.
the skill deficits
Yep.
that kids may have. And remember, math is, by its inherent nature, it's cyclical. So if you don't get something the first time around, the next time it comes around, it's more complex, there's more to it. And so if you have skill gaps, the gaps get bigger.
Yes.
So again, there are a lot of supports in place. We have after-school tutoring available every day. We have enrichment activities that some of our kids are doing. So there's a lot of levels of support. But, you know, again, this is going to be one of those things that kids just need to continue to practice.
And also going with the social emotional, that doesn't go away with a little bit of addressing in the school. I mean, these are ongoing issues. Our
These-
school district is. and
These
also
are ongoing issues.
Are going
We-
to have to deal with for a long
Yes,
time.
and,
to
and
come.
as part of the discipline, we have seen an uptick in substance misuse. I think that all goes along with kind of the post-pandemic or, you know, still pandemic struggles that we have. So we've seen more kids with drugs, alcohol, e-cigarettes, vape devices, all of that. We've seen an increase over past years, and we're trending ahead of where we would want to be. But, you know, I will be nothing but direct and straightforward that this is what we're dealing with. These are the challenges that we have. These are challenges that teachers are facing in classrooms and administrators are facing every single day. And we will continue to hold kids accountable, to have high expectations, but it is a ongoing challenge every single day.
Thank you, Brian. Are you done with your
I am.
superintendent report?
Thank
Okay.
you.
All right, perfect. So, no old business, right?
Nope.
So moving on to new business. So now you could do budget transfers.
Thank you. So you have one budget transfer tonight. You'll have another one, not Wednesday, but at the next school board meeting. This one pertains to the budget transfer that Jared spoke to at the last meeting with regard to the irrigation system. And the budget transfer total is $49,349. And it's coming from transportation lines, both at Mountain View Athletics as well as regular ed at the regular ed transportation.
Go ahead, Jared.
Just because I can't remember what the RFP was for the statement of work, does that cover the in total cost of the RFP that was presented?
Yes, so I'm waiting, Randy contacted me, I was out last week, he contacted me that they were doing some additional like pressure testing of the water down there, and he's waiting to hear back from that. So I just want everybody to know that he is concerned about the water pressure, because we did get readings from Lee Minnick at the Grassmere Water Precinct, and now Randy wants more testing done. So as of now, that is it.
So this is the amount, just because I can't remember,
Yeah.
this is the amount that was approved
Yep.
for the work?
Yeah.
Do we need a motion to accept these transfers? as
Yeah,
presented?
so what happens then is that because it's over $10,000, we need the board to approve the budget transfer.
I'll make a motion to accept the transfers as presented to
Thank you,
cover the
Jared.
RFP for the sprinkler system at the middle school.
Thank you, Jared. Do I have a second? By Terry. Any other discussion or questions for Scott before I do roll call? All right, seeing none. Retta?
Yes.
Ginny?
Yes.
Jared?
Yes.
Dan?
Yes.
Janelle?
Yes.
Ellen?
Yes.
Terry?
Yes.
And Heather, yes. Motion passed. Thank you, Scott.
So you'll have the other budget transfer that you're gonna have at the next session is gonna be for that remote teacher who's helping us with quarantine students, as well as that stipend for the nurse who's helping us with COVID-related items, and that will happen at your next regularly scheduled
That's
meeting.
in November.
Correct. If Dan Cloutier would like me to give him the information that he requested, I can do that now regarding the budget questions, or Dan, would you like to wait until Wednesday?
I would like to defer to the chair for what she would like to do.
What budget question, was this stuff
Dan
that's
asked the
coming up
question,
for
how
the high
many
school?
people, how many administrators
Oh.
were included in the admin pool? What was the average raise. I have all of that if you want it, or I can wait till next Wednesday.
Can we wait till Wednesday so we could get our stuff out
Yep.
and people can write notes?
That's fine.
Is that all right, Dan?
Works for me.
All right, thank you. All right, so moving on, we have a few first reads. So the first one you have is policy BCB, it's board member conflict of interest. This came up in our audit findings that it hadn't been reviewed in quite some time. So the policy review committee did review it. We didn't see anything wrong, and we have a review date on it. So because we're not changing anything, we can waive policy BGA and pass this tonight, or we can wait into our second read, which is November 15th. So it's completely up to you guys.
I'll move to waive BGA
Okay, that's policy development systems.
and approve this.
All right, so you're making a motion to waive
Policy
BGA. Okay.
And approve this evening.
And approve what, I'm sorry?
BCB.
Can we do them all in one?
I believe so.
Okay. All right, just want to make sure. All right, so I have a motion from Ellen. Do I have a second?
Second.
By Ginny. Any discussion before I do roll call?
So
Yes, go ahead.
why is this being presented? What's changed for it, for BCB?
BCB, the
Update
audit
report.
finding is it hadn't been reviewed in a while. So we just reviewed it, we saw no changes, and so we put a review date on it at the bottom. So we're just approving the review date.
It's to update the review
Yeah, I'm not
date
Yeah.
approving
in
the
the
policy,
policy
I'm
book.
approving the review date.
Right.
Yeah, I guess, because there's a motion been seconded, I'd like to actually read this and digest it a little
We
bit.
can
It's been a
table
long
it.
time since we've looked at it. So for this motion, I'll be voting no. I would like to actually wait.
We can
to read
table
this
it and
come
do
back.
it at second read, it's not a problem. Is that all right with everybody if we table the motion and just come back with the second read?
Well, then,
So is Jared making a motion to table? I'll second.
I'll make a motion to table the waiving of a policy on first reads.
Okay, that's fine. And then Dan, you're seconding?
No, I'm not seconding that motion. I'm seconding the motion that was made. I don't think we can, even if we table just the first one, it kind of makes it the second, but no, I'm not going to second that.
Okay.
I'm going to say, I don't want to, I think it's appropriate to waive it
Waive the policy BGA.
and pass it, but if he wants to
Read
do
it,
both, I have no problem tabling
Ellen's
the
motion.
motion that we just made, which was both of them.
to
Right.
the next meeting.
Right. So are you good to table Ellen's motion?
Yes.
Okay.
I'm okay with that.
All right, so Denise, did you get that? Okay, so Jared made a motion to table Ellen's motion. Do I have a second?
Yep.
I'll second that motion.
All right, so then we have Dan. So I'm going to do, okay, so I'm going to do roll call. Retta?
Yes.
Ginny?
Yes.
Jared?
Yes.
Dan?
Yes.
Janelle?
Yes.
Ellen?
Yes.
Terry?
Yes.
And Heather, yes, so motion passed. So this will come back on November 15th. The next one is policy IB. This was a request from Facility Planning Committee to review, and we did. And you can see that all the red. So from what I understand, back in 2000, when this policy was made, a study committee was formed, and the numbers that you see is what they came up with. When we looked at the State Department of Ed, there is no square footage, but our school does try to adhere to these guidelines. So read through it. Go ahead, Ellen.
There are state standards of square footage per child in each room.
We couldn't, Dan, do you remember? Because we looked
I know
at,
we
we
have.
spent a lot of time on this policy.
Yeah, I think MC looked for this, and
so did Wendy.
whether there is or not, I'm not sure, what is it that you're looking to put in there that
Yeah.
we're not doing, Ellen?
Yes, because we have such a variety of classroom sizes. And I didn't bring it with me, I have it with my facilities folder. There is in fact state standards for square footage
So
per children.
That's correct. They are listed in ED 306. They do tend to, so I haven't looked through this lens, but they are to be eligible for building aid. So I'd have to
Guidelines for
look
that,
at
yes.
the rest of it into, we don't really have a challenge right now of accepting building aid. So I think I'd have to look in greater detail, but there are required minimum square footage requirements for new construction
Right.
that are part of ED 306, which are the minimum standards.
And using that as a guideline for obviously the state wants us to be going by.
Which the policy does say they're going to try to adhere to it, but the numbers are right there in that policy of what the study committee came up with, because every school is different.
And most of our classrooms are different from
Right,
each other.
exactly.
We have very few 900 square foot rooms in our elementary schools at any rate. But those numbers, I guess I would prefer that it state more clearly that the square footage in the classrooms as related to the state standards of square footage per child shall not be exceeded.
I understand,
Yeah,
but I
Heather?
don't, go ahead, Dan.
So, Ellen, there is no standard in the state guidelines that represents the classroom sizes of Goffstown, New Hampshire, and they never will, because we cannot make our classroom sizes any bigger
Right.
without new construction.
Right.
If we do ever get new construction, we can adhere to what they would like to see going forward. But for the moment, our policy guides us for what we currently have. That was why we
I would
presented it the
have
way
an
we did.
exception to that. We have virtually maybe 2 classrooms that are 900 square feet, yet we're allowing 28 kids in a room. That, to me, is not acceptable. And it doesn't meet the, what is it, I think it's 30 or 35 square feet per child in most of our rooms. And I'm just asking that the class size be aligned with the square footage per child, whether it's, I don't care if it's new construction, it's a guideline for the amount of space the state wants us to have per child in our classrooms. That means we cannot be putting 25 kids in a room that's 700 square feet. And we have classrooms below that even, that we put more kids in. I'm just looking that we really, to keep our education up and the quality we have and want, that we deliberately not put more kids in there than they really should be. And if you guys disagree, that's fine.
Dan,
But,
go ahead, you can, well, we talked a lot about this, Ellen. Go ahead, Dan.
Let me ask Mr. Bulkey. In the regulation that you see from the Department of Education where they have square footage per class, does it say the number of feet per student? Or is it derived from taking the total square footage divided by the total pupils they indicate? Because in my brain, there are a lot of parameters that go into calculating a 900 square foot. It's not like you can walk into a room and put tape on the floor like a tic-tac-toe board and say, this is the number of square feet per student.
That's what they did for COVID.
So I think it's actually both, Dan. So and again, I could see if I could track it down on online right now, but from memory, there is a per square foot per pupil in that series in ED 306, as well as the overall class size requirements. And you're likely right, Dan. They probably backed into that number, but I never did the math to check it.
Okay. And do you know how, it would be important to me to understand our particular sizes based on what they're seeing in here that the study committee did at that point. I'm not ready to throw out what the study committee did back then because I know nothing's changed.
Right.
And again, I would just continue to emphasize, all of our elementary schools are undersized and full.
Right.
We have no space at the elementary level. And it is a significant challenge for us.
Right.
We do not have that here at Goffstown High School, and to a lesser extent, we do not have that at Mountain View Middle School. Both Mountain View and the high school have had considerably higher numbers over the years, and we fit fine in both of those spaces. It's the elementary schools where we struggle the most.
Absolutely.
Our oldest schools that have the smallest square footage.
I do know we have some classrooms that if you divide by the square footage per child that the state standard has, we're not supposed to have more than 17 kids in them.
So then
And
what do
this
you
says
do with the
19
other
to
kids?
24.
I mean, Ellen, I get what you're saying. Nobody wants overstuffed classrooms, but you can't, and we won't turn away kids. And if a class is too big, they try to put them in a bigger classroom. But unless we build another school, I don't know how we're going to fix this until we get more
That's
schools.
The purpose.
Exactly, which is why we have the facilities committee to try to promote that. But we don't have building aid, it costs a lot of money. So this policy is, they're trying to do the best that they can, but we're getting more and more kids. So if you want us to go back over this again at
No, do what you
policy,
want.
we
No,
can,
do
but
what
I
you
don't
want.
know what else we can do to change that.
No, don't do it.
Jared, did you have your hand up?
Nope.
No, okay.
I've got a
That's
question.
the other two people.
Oh, Retta and then Janelle. Go ahead, Retta.
I have a couple questions. One, and when I was reading this beforehand, it mentions this study that took place, but it doesn't really give us much reference. Who was there? How was it decided? How did they come up with these numbers? I don't know if there's a study that we can look at.
It was done in 2000. I don't know who did the study. It was a study committee when, I don't know if it's.
Yeah, and I'm not looking for,
Yeah,
I'm not
I'd have to
necessarily
ask
looking for an
MC.
answer.
I don't know if anybody knows. Do you know, Brian?
Are we talking about the demographic study?
No, the study committee that came up with these numbers.
It's an SAU 19 class size study.
Study committee.
Jenny's memory.
Jenny, do you remember?
I don't remember
this-
who
this-
was in it or.
This one
Yeah.
predates me for sure.
Right. So I guess I have questions about what these numbers represent, but really, I guess I have questions, how can we make a policy that one, you have to base it on something concrete and the class size and that's what the state puts out. It's concrete, it's something you can judge on. But if you're not compliant, then it's kind of a double-edged sword. If we have a policy saying you can't have more than 20 students and we've got to put 22 because we don't have the space,
Right.
then, we're breaking our own policy. However, at a certain point, if we have to make a point to the town or to the community saying our classrooms are too small,
Right.
what standards are we going to use here? And, kind of the study that took place at least 10 years ago, we don't know how it, what was used to make those decisions. So I guess I'm concerned that this is a policy because either we're going to be compliant or we're not going to be compliant. And if we're not compliant, it's because we don't have space, and so what do we do?
Right.
Was that study done when Mountain View was built?
2000? I don't know.
Mr.
Do
Gross?
you remember?
I have no idea.
We use the state standards.
Just,
What
I
are
thought we were
elementary
done.
schools?
Janelle, you had your hand up before.
I was just was looking at ED 306 and trying to find the information that we were following along, and it looks like everything is right in order with what they have here, which is kindergarten through grade 2 is 20 students or less, grade 3 to 5, 25 students or less, and middle, junior, senior high, 30 students or less. And then they go into talk about laboratory classes, 24 or less.
Yeah, our numbers were a little different from what we understand. The study committee tried to mimic, but not be
right on.
not
Yep.
give a little wiggle room.
Yep.
So we can bring it back, and we can ask to get more information on the study committee and bring it back to the board if that's what you guys want.
I'll send over I'll try and send over the data that I got and used, and it's not just the number of children in a classroom, it's the size of the classroom that impacts what's going on in it. And since we do have a number of significantly below standard sized classrooms, that means we should have that much less children in them. So that's why I feel we need to relate the number of children in the room to the size of the room. And there is a standard in the state regs, and I'll go pull it out again, that I found. And I know we did consider that in Mountain View construction, because it was construction. And to get the state aid, you had to meet the minimum standard. So I know that that was part of that. And that's my only point is, the number of kids in the room needs to be related to the size and square footage that the state recommends.
So Heather?
Yes, Dan.
So when the state starts funding us, what they promised they would fund us, I'll go ahead and follow those standards.
Right.
Otherwise than that, I don't like what I see currently.
Yeah. All right, so moving on to the next policy is JCA, school assignment, change of school assignment. You'll see in the red, we added 5 days at the top, and the rest was just cleaning up. And then with JEC, we're getting rid of JEC because that policy is in JCA. So those two are kind of connected together. And JEC is manifest educational hardship. So that is all incorporated into JCA. So we can bring those back November 15th for second read. Jared?
Just looking at this briefly, and I know that we're going to ask questions at our second read.
Sure.
Looking in the middle of the page, 1, where the policy, however, does not limit the superintendent's discretion to make other in-district assignments consistent with applicable board policies. Does this include potentially taking people from New Boston and bringing them into Goffstown?
No, that would, the only applicability that I would see in that sentence would be if there were circumstances that I had a change of school assignment of a child who should attend Maple, and I assigned that child at Bartlett. So not between New Boston.
Okay, so when we say in-district, it's in the town of Goffstown?
In Goffstown,
Right.
just in the Goffstown School District.
Thank you.
Correct.
So you have both JCA and JEC. So then the last one is JQ, and that is student fees, fines, and charges. And that one
I don't think I have that one.
I don't think I have it either.
yeah, I don't have it. I have it in my binder. You guys don't have it?
No.
No.
Okay, so it's student,
You're talking JQ?
JQ.
Yep,
So-
that's the student fees and fines where we added a couple of words.
Yep,
And
I had it in.
made it a little stronger for the principals to be able to make sure they contact to collect those fees.
right. So and when you get it, the first abbreviation is IT, so we wrote it out as informational technology equipment, so people know. And yes, like Dan said, there's going to be consequences because we're not getting equipment back or uniforms or something. So after a certain amount of time, it'll be up to the business administration office to have consequences, which could be loss of student privileges, co-curricular activities, parking, that kind of stuff. So Denise will email that out, and all the red is what we added. So read through that. And that will come back, they will all come back November 15th. We will bring policy IIB back to policy and hopefully get some more information for you guys on that one. So that is it for policy. So now we have staffing.
So under staffing, all we have this evening is at the request of this board, we had Mrs. Gogan, the principal of Bartlett, put together her request for the interventionist position. This is budgeted for the FY23. In fact, this was that one new position that Jared had pointed out on the 1100 line. That was that increase. That's this position. And this board asked if this is something that we're supporting, why don't we consider it for this year? And that's what's before you this evening. So as the board requested, This is a memo from Mrs. Gogan. The cost estimate would be, and I'm assuming this would be prorated, Kate, because we're already partway into the year, but the cost estimate is $86,720, which includes a two-person medical and dental at a master's level with 9 years of experience. So that's where the salary is predicated upon. And you can see here that Jerry gave some general information about how the position would be used. Primarily, the position would be focused on early literacy acquisition. So this would be grades 1, grades 2, 1 and 2, the primary focus would be phonemic awareness or phonological awareness, which are some of those precursor sounds.
We don't have that, just so you know.
They don't have this memo?
No.
Okay. So I'm reading you the memo then. It's 2 pages long. I will
That's all right.
summarize the memo.
Just summarize.
So what she said is she's targeting that through with support and guidance from our reading specialist at Bartlett. We're very fortunate that we have a terrific reading specialist at Bartlett who helps the children and works with the teachers. That's Annie Mello. The new interventionist position will provide targeted services to match specific student deficits, particularly in the areas of phonological processing, phonemic awareness, and knowledge of the alphabetic principle, as these are key areas that affect eventual success in reading. It's important for the board just to remember that we have kids come into first grade who are reading chapter books, and we have kids who come into first grade who don't know their letters and their sounds. So teachers are working across that entire continuum of need. Placement, student baseline data will be analyzed and students will initially be grouped based according to their phonological processing abilities. The purpose of gathering data is to guide instruction and target deficits. So she's basically saying that if she had this position, she would use formal and informal classroom and assessment data to make determinations of groupings. Timeline, she goes on to talk about how she would, kind of the logistics of how she would use the position to target and support first and second grade classrooms, the kind of data that she would use, and a lot of it has to do with some of the screenings that we're doing for like the dyslexia requirement. And then she gets into kind of how she would use the position in grade 1, how she would use it in grade 2, how she would use it in grade 3, and would not. She's not anticipating having this position working with fourth graders at Bartlett. So it would primarily be grades 1 and 2, and to a lesser extent, grade 3. And she provided some additional, a lot of detail about the kinds of skills, rhyming, blending, counting syllables. I mean, it just kind of just goes into how we teach little kids to read. But I apologize, I thought you had the memo.
No
But
worries.
the reason for this request was from the board to consider this for this school year. I will say, if you said, Brian, do you think you're going to be able to find somebody for this position? I'm not real sure we would. We have learned that these positions have increasingly been more and more challenging for us to find. So I don't know. I would like to think so, and I will be optimistic, but this is not, hiring an interventionist is not hiring an entry-level teacher. This is somebody who already has years of experience and has instructional tools in the toolbox that they're going to be able to come in and work with individual and groups of kids, as well as supporting teachers. And because Mrs. McGrath is here, she would be happy to answer any questions that anyone may have about the interventionist position.
I have one.
Go ahead, Dan. Did you hear it?
Where would they do the interventionalist over at Bartlett?
Yeah, the where is a problem.
In a tent.
Yeah.
You know, so we don't have any office space. We have people sharing office space at Bartlett as it is, but we have been using the cafeteria for small group instruction. So my guess is Mrs. Gogan might consider that space. But this would also be what I would call a push-in type support, Dan, where the teacher would be going into the regular ed classroom and working with individual or groups of kids during their reading block. So this would be an additional adult in the room, maybe an additional station or an additional center, but working in the classroom with individual groups of kids.
Follow up.
Go ahead, Dan.
If we were to approve that this year and we were fortunate enough to get one, would this be a good, not only for the kids to begin getting ramped up early, but a precursor to getting it flushed out for next year?
I think it would. And again, this was a request for next school year that we did support. The interventionist, she specifically is focused on reading. As I just had stated, that I'm actually more concerned about math than I am concerned about reading. And all of the same corresponding early mathematic knowledge assimilation all occur. So there is kind of the mathematical equivalent of phonemic awareness is number sense, and so there's a lot of different early math skills that kids need to learn. Mrs. Gogan's memo doesn't mention math at all, but arguably from my perspective, math support is likely of greater need at this point than reading support.
Are you all set, Dan?
Yes, and I tend to, they're both very much in need. Thank you.
They both are very much in need. I would agree.
Go ahead, Ellen.
This discussion came up as a result of the data we received from Bartlett about the children coming in. And the percent of them, what was it, 16% of them or something, didn't have those very basic skills. For variety, they didn't go to the public kindergarten, they didn't go to kindergarten at all, whatever. And that's where my thinking was, we need to do more than we're doing, because they stated it takes years for them to catch up. And that's where the idea of the intervention is for the reading, to have those kiddos as early as possible when they enter first grade, to be able to get those skills they need. They're not spending 4 years being behind and catching up. I don't disagree at all. Math has taken a hit with the pandemic. But this entrance into Bartlett of these children in first grade has been year after year after year, and we have been struggling to try and catch these kids up. And my thought was, let's do something far more dynamic and immediate, because the kids are there now,
Right.
that keep coming in year after year so far behind. So that's that number of children that we were listening to, I think at our last meeting, was what prompted the thought of, let's do it this year and not wait for next year. The kids are there now.
Right.
So it's not this against math or anything, because
Right.
yes, the need's there.
Right, they both.
But this is every year
Yeah.
that this is going on, and it has a constant effect going down for these children.
Absolutely. Thank you, Ellen. Go ahead, Jared.
I know that we're budgeting this for our next year, Brian, so do we need this as a one-year approval in order for this position?
Yeah, so if this is something that the board was in support of from a financial perspective, I would think that you would have basically two options of how to fund this position, and I'll give them in order of my preference. If you were so inclined to support this, I think that the regular school budget, Fund 10, for this fiscal year would have the capacity to pick up this position. Or secondarily, you could certainly use ESSER funds. This would be a very appropriate ESSER fund type project. And again, my only thinking is, if we're looking at some HVAC projects as well as windows that we know we can use ESSER funds for, that would give a little more of that money available. But either funding methodology would be entirely appropriate.
Do you have a follow-up, Jared?
Statement.
Yeah, go ahead.
I'd like to make a motion to
Wait.
accept.
Wait, because Amanda had a question first, so can you just hold that 1 second?
I
I'm
just
sorry.
have a quick question. So it's one full-time position. Would it require a different approval if, say, you had two half-time positions? I'm just thinking about who's home right now. I was one of those moms who were at home, completely certified, kind of ready to jump in, not quite. This stage in the year, that might be someone that you might be more likely to pick
Yeah,
up than somebody
it-
who's looking for full-time?
It may. It would be a 1.0 full-time equivalency that we would have the ability to, consider slicing it in half. We could, and sometimes you get lucky like that, so that if there was, a math teacher or, someone who has some background, some experience in early literacy, if they were part-time, we could post it as part-time or full-time and see what we get.
Thank you, Amanda. Okay, Jared, now go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'd like to make a motion to accept the Bartlett interventionist position at a master's step 9 for the remainder of the year, coming from the general fund, Fund 10.
All right, I have a,
May I ask that it be up to a master's step 9, so that we can hire a master's step 7 if it comes in?
I think Jared is just approving the position.
The position.
And
Oh, just
then
approving the
if and
position.
when we have a candidate,
would be
the candidate may have 15 years' experience. If I could pick up
We'll
someone
snag
who,
'em.
yeah,
Yeah,
I would
okay.
scarf them up. I wouldn't limit us.
so his motion is fine.
I think his motion is giving us authorization to proceed with creating and posting and recruiting for the position.
Okay. So I have a motion by Jared. Do I have a second?
Second.
By Ginny?
Can I hear an approval for Jared that that is indeed what he intended to say? Because I like that better.
Yes, Dan.
Thank you.
You're welcome, Dan.
All right, so I have a motion, I have a second. Do I have any other further discussion before I do roll call? All right, Retta?
Yes.
Ginny?
Yes.
Jared?
Yes.
Dan?
Yes.
Janelle?
Yes.
Ellen?
Yes.
Terry?
Yes.
And Heather, yes. Motion passed.
Madam Chair?
Yes.
I do need to go. I have something happening that I need to go take care of.
Okay, Ellen, thank you.
Thank you for the support of that position. I know that Mrs. Gogan is very appreciative, and the kids at Bartlett will benefit, so thank you.
All right, yes, definitely. Hopefully, next meeting we get a nomination.
I don't know about next meeting.
All right, a couple of
Wednesday.
meetings, I know, that's Wednesday. No. All right, so is there other business that may legally come before the meeting? We do have non-public tonight. All right, seeing none. So we do need to go into non-public. Which one do you want to start with?
Let's please start with A.
All right. So I'll need a motion to go into non-public under RSA 91-A, semicolon 3, 2A, the dismissal, promotion, or compensation of any public employee, or the discipline of such employee, or the investigation of any charges against him or her, unless the employee affected, 1, has a right to a meeting, and 2, requests that the meeting be open, in which case the request shall be granted.
So moved.
By Jared, second by Janelle. I'll do a roll call. Retta?
Yes.
Ginny?
Yes.
Jared?
Yes.
Dan?
Yes.
Janelle?
Yes.
Terry?
Yes.
And Heather, yes. So we are in non-public. So we're going to take a break.